All right, welcome back. It's another episode of the Double Swing. I know for you guys, it may have been a few days. For me, it's been all of 24 hours since we last recorded, but we're getting straight back into it. We've got another guest, this time another more EU focused, maybe a little more tier 1 edge to him. Ne0Kai been raising up the ranks really quickly, the new co-caster of Anders. I can't remember how new that is, but it feels very new to me, so I'm going to act like it is. But congratulations on that. I see you making moves, man.
Yeah, I mean, I would just throw out, it's kind of like a duo out of, friendship more, I say. Like his primary duo, of course, is still Henry, but I think for me, it's like, Henry doesn't work some of the gigs, and I'm really good friends with Anders, so it just works out being very, very easy, and always fun working with him.
I mean, it's 2024. It's another situationship.
Exactly. We who doesn't love a love triangle? So no, it's been fun. I mean, it started kind of last year at the Blast Paris RMR. We just by chance ended up being in like a trio. It was me, Anders, and Cody, and then sort of out of nowhere, me and Anders really gelled, got on really well, and then I mean, it's thankfully led to him offering me a lot of opportunities. So shout out Anders one time for the work. Really, thanks for paying the electricity bills, mate.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I mean, I guess we can call your setup like a bit of polycastery. It's just, everyone gets the chemistry, everyone gets the vibe, and it all works out. But yeah, we've got another RMR. This is RMR B. We did RMR A yesterday, and we're looking at this lineup, and I think, on the top end, it looks a bit weaker, but at the bottom end, I think there's more interesting teams. I think you do have a deeper selection of those tier 2 goats. The ones you watch week in, week out at 9 a.m., 10 a.m., playing these endlessly, weirdly named cups. But let's get straight into the show. I think we had a discussion about picks, a bit of a conversation about, I guess, the game theory of all of this, and Yumi's ended up with the number 1 pick. Take it away. Who are you going to take?
I mean, I don't know how I ended up with first pick, because it's usually the guest that leads, but I'm going to go Spirit. I think this is the confidently best team within this group. Sure, G2 have won some trophies this year, and I can't discredit that at all, but I think Spirit have been the more exciting team, and the one that has higher sort of prospects or higher ceiling. They've still made the finals of like a fair few events. They've won spring finals, Katowice this year, almost won world finals. I mean, if not for the fact that G2 were actually just better than them in that particular final. So I don't really see problems with Spirit outside of it's still a young team, but they made it to the main stage of Copenhagen, and I expect them to do the same in Shanghai. Whichever one of you wants. Is there any push at all? No.
If you want to take it, I mean, there's not much argument for me there on that side. I have to say. I mean, I feel like if I originally was going to go first, but I want to make life a little bit harder for myself. But that easily would have been my first pick as well. I will say though, it feels like this is, at least for me, make or break a little bit for Spirit. I feel like we've already had conversations about, I mean, people saying Zontix. I still really like Zontix, but people been calling for his head. I've personally been calling for Chopper a little bit. I think Chopper Ball is sort of starting to fail in front of our eyes. We've seen kind of Spirit dip off, but I think in this level of a competition against kind of, no offense, some of these lower sides and some of these sides who, we even question why they're here, like NIP, right? Dog shit. So you ask questions and say like, in this sort of situation, you just feel like Donk alone can just pull them through these sort of series, best of ones and best of threes. He alone can be the difference maker. So I feel like if we were talking about kind of the major itself, there's definitely arguments to say like Spirit might actually be in a weird precarious spot where their confidence is all over the place. Is this sort of meta gaming that they've been doing this year, dodging certain tournaments? They didn't play Iron Rio. There was another one, I can't remember which one, but one of the ones that was further away from Europe, maybe Chengdu, something like that. They didn't play. But they've been doing that, to kind of not burn out, which I think is a very honorable thing. But at the same time, you do see the Spirit side make some weird rookie errors, and it feels like if you guys just had a few more reps under your belt and maybe you were a little bit more cohesive in some of these situations, that's where maybe dodging these tournaments feels like it doesn't work out for them. But I guess they've still got the rankings, so they're chilling. But yeah, I think this is fine. I can't really disagree with Spirit in this sense, but I do worry about them looking past the RMR.
I have issues with you call it Chopper Ball. For me, it's Chopper and Halley. They're the duo that really establish the system, decide how the player's going to play, but also in a sort of off the server way, prepare the players. And that's the problem with having a very young group of fraggers. You need to have them in the right mindset. And I feel like Halley, he said himself, he's dropped the ball on a few occasions. Considering the way we've seen them lose series, just completely collapse, he can only get it wrong so many times, I think. But no, I do have some issues with this setup. I think it was today I was looking into some advanced sort of nuke stats, and something that always bothered me about Spirit is how much Zontix gets to fight a door. It's statistically just one of the worst fights you can take on all of Nuke. Win or lose, you're more likely to lose that round if you just took that fight. It's actually horrendous. So, no, there are things I think they need to reassess. How heavily they lean on Donk can be an issue on the big stages, in the big games against teams who have other superstars. This is sort of a flat track kind of event. And they've got the best flat track bully in the scene. A confident, aggressive, highly skilled rifler who should be absolutely demolishing everyone. I don't care how much I believe in some of the young talents on other teams. Like, I think Zyphon, highly mechanically skilled player. MPL, a really smart, savvy outer player. I don't care, because Donk will just dry sweep and smash their heads off. He is that much better than them. So no, Spirit are a lock, an excellent first pick. Not going to be a real problem, I think, for them until we get to those stages. Now, there will be stages in the first sort of opening events. It'll be a small one, but they'll be there. So maybe the pressure start mounting earlier than they expect. But for now, yeah, Donk, set a rating record. Go do it. Give us like a 1.9, a 2.9. Do something ridiculous. That would be a lot of fun. And this is the kind of a place to do it. Right. I got second pick, which I did not think I'd get again, because I think it's the best spot to pick from in this sort of event. I'm going to take G2. I'm going to let's get the big names straight off the board. Let's make this awkward as early as possible. Who are you going to pick now? That's the questions now get complicated. Sure, we talk about G2 as a team who are very individually reliant, on certain players. The tactical system seems to be coming together, but it seems a little bit too much, too little, too late. They're just about to lose Ne0Kai, and at that point, I think a lot of the things they've built up kind of have to be replaced, rebuilt, and that's going to be difficult. But all of that is for a future G2 to think about. Currently, this G2 has m0NESY, has Ne0Kai, has the best, or the second best T-side player behind their own AWPer in the world in Malbs MD, a hunter who can still find miracles left, right, and center. He's not the hunter of old, but the hunter of now is plenty good enough to be a legit threat against the best in the world. He's going to be fine here. And Snacks, yeah, this is where he should be playing. If this was a CCT bracket, this is where I expect to find Snacks on a different roster, and his mechanical ability really backs that up. But he's going to be fine here. This is a G2 walk in the park. They won't have that famous incident again. They're not going home at the RMRs. This is a walk in the park.
I gotta agree. I mean, unfortunately, I was one of those people who touted the Snacks move as being a bad one. I still stick with it. I still do think he's pretty ass. But it's just when you've got the best player in the world, one of the best T-side players in the world, as you were kind of talking about, you just can't, again, it's kind of the same argument with Spirit. It's just firepower alone, these guys will just brute force their way. I mean, they're starting off with G2, with an IP, may I say. I've just kind of spoken about those guys. That should be an absolute breeze. Best of ones or not, this is a G2 side that just really shouldn't fall that flat. I think they have so many different assets of where they can kind of find this firepower, and I think that's the big thing for them. So as much as Snacks can be a liability, especially mechanically, all you really need from him is if we can get Snacks a 0.9 rating of a HLTV rating, that's good enough, just because m0NESY will pull them through. I feel as well with the recent performances we've seen out of him, especially with kind of Blast World Finals, for me, he's vying, I mean, more or less. This major will be the big teller, but I think he's gone very far ahead in that #1 in the world race. I don't really think Donk's that close anymore. I think Zywo's got to go incredible at the major if he's going to be able to contest. I think m0NESY's probably done enough. So you've got all that, plus you sort of briefly touched it, the sort of last dance. I feel like this is where G2 are well, fuck it, we got nothing to lose here, fellas. Let's just go out with a bang. We've been in these sort of weird, precarious spots before, and if Ne0Kai is to be going, I mean, obviously the CEO's more or less already said it. I don't know. I can't see a world in which they arguably even lose a series. I mean, maybe unless they were to go against somebody like a Spirit, but anyone else, I think they'd be more or less absolutely fine.
Are we not concerned at all about the peaks and troughs of this team when it comes to we just win it, we win an event and then we bomb out of the next one? Are we not concerned about that at all when they've just won the World Finals and now it's the RMRs into the major? I think the signaling for G2 is the weird part for me, where, like you said, the CEO is like, well, we may have already picked up players that we can replace Ne0Kai with that's already on the team. If that were true, you would have given him all the spots that Ne0Kai is currently playing so that he'd fill that role now. Like, if that was going to be the confident step, that would have been the way to do it. Like that. I get that Ne0Kai is the bigger personality, and maybe it'd be harder to control in that sense. But if you are really intent on replacing him, you would be replacing him, and Ne0Kai would effectively be a role player. That isn't happening, and I guess that would maybe affect their success, but it also hurts. I think part of their stake to their claim. I do think, and I thought before m0NESY even had the World Finals appearance, that he was the best player in the world. Mainly just because he's been so consistent, even through all the weird turbulence of this G2 roster. That and like eye test mechanics wise, he is the cleanest of all of them. Even if I've seen some of those mechanics falter more recently than ever before. So yeah, I it's not that I don't like this team. I think they actually have a lot, like you said, a lot of win conditions. But the signaling and the up and down topsy turvy nature of them, they're still like a hard team to pick for me, just because I can't quite get behind like the consistency of them.
No, I see where you're coming from, but the consistency aspect, yeah, they've had ups and downs. They have, that's true. I mean, we saw, what was that event? Yeah, Rio was a shocker beyond shockers. But if you look at their events in general, yeah, the Cologne is a bad one, but it's not that terrible.
It's more excusable.
Yeah, and as you go back in time, you realize that, yeah, the lows aren't as low as they specifically were at Rio. And this is an event where you don't need the entire team fragging out to beat some of these teams. I think they should be quite unconcerned, especially going into an opening game. Should be a layup against a kind of gimped out NIP, like, stand-in coming in. That should be a breeze. They should have all the runway to get rolling. Neo, you have free reign. You have 2 picks now. I wonder who you're going to lead off with, but the big favorites are off the board. Everything from this point onwards is dubious debatable in my eyes.
Yeah. I wanted to make my life a little bit harder. I think this was kind of the reason why. But I think my first team to kind of go through for me, there's going to be debate here, but I wanted to hear me out first. I want to go heroic here. And that may feel a little rogue, but for me, it's, I got to catch them at Elisa. And I know they absolutely fumbled that best of 5, 1 map up, and then get reverse sweep by Ents. And of course, a lot of conversations about that Ents side, 3 new players, all the rest. But for the most part, for me, heroic, I've been liking actually what I've been seeing out from them. Rio, top 4, pretty solid. You get to Elisa, top 2, losing the finals, pretty good. Getting towards Thunder Pick, the online stage, they kind of waltzed their way through, didn't really break too much of a sweat. Again, losing the finals, but fair enough, they lose to Mongols, not a bad side by any means. The Mongols are a bit of a giant killer side. Best team in Asia we've seen in a long time, if not arguably ever as well. So I don't even think that's kind of one of those end of the world type things. But for me, the way I see it, I sort of see Heroic as a side who have, I think, done a really good job of rebranding themselves and refining their identity. They at one point were one of the best teams in the world, the best team in the world actually at one point, but they lost that, right? They had to go for a full rebuild. It was a bit of a tough spot for them. They obviously lost all their players. There was all the jokes about the stabby stuff. And I actually think they've done a pretty good job in terms of rebuilding this side. The win condition for them is always Dexter for me. I mean, he is still on his day, absolutely an elite level AWPer, one of the best in the world, without a shadow of a doubt, in my opinion. And if he plays to his sort of level, he's always fantastic. Nerds, we know the level this guy can bring to the server. We saw it on Ents. We've seen it in Heroic as well. But I think for me, the real reason why I actually want to lean in favor of Heroic is actually just because the recent form of Tessus and Shush. Both of these guys have just been lights out. I mean, we haven't seen this sort of form from them since Heroic were the best side in the world, right? And I think that's the big thing for me, is that they're now no longer what felt like for a while where it was we're really relying on Nerds, or really relying on Dexter when he could make it to events. And if Dexter wasn't there, then it was all on Nerds, and that's when they would kind of crumble a little bit. And Tessus and Shush, they do their roles, obviously, but they weren't putting up these pretty incredible numbers that we've seen out from them recently. So that, for me, is where I'm leaning kind of in favor of these guys. So their impact, for me, has been kind of incredible. In particular, Tessus, I think he's really started to look super solid. And I think when you look at this RMR and some of the teams, because I view this one as one of those where it's, there's a couple of teams at the top, i.e. G2 Spirit, maybe Heroic. a few teams really at the bottom. You know, you can talk about kind of your TSMs, for example, and then it's quite bulked out by the middle of the pack. I think Heroic are better than that pack, right? I think a lot of those teams that are in there are kind of dwindling a lot. There's a few teams that I think, in my opinion, are actually a little bit overrated, which I'm sure we'll probably touch on at some point. And that's why I think Heroic in this situation for me can just coast. I think they've got the individuals. Kicksan's actually been doing an okay job. There's definitely been people calling on his head a little bit in terms of the calling, but I think at this sort of level where it's just sort of puggy, quite scrappy, sort of tier 1.5 kind of strike for a lot of the games they're going to be playing, I don't think they're going to falter. I think they should be absolutely fine. They're starting off a Paravision too. I'm a bit of a hater of Paravision. I really don't rate this side at all. I think they're incredibly overrated as a team. I think that should be a waltz of a game. But when they get to best of threes, I just think they're going to, for me at least, make it look quite easy.
See, I think I'd maybe push back a little bit in that, like, Shush and Tessus, I think, have always been solid on this roster. I think we've brought up Heroic before on the show, where Nerds is maybe, like, he'll always be like a statistical leader, but you know, in the same way that you'll look at teams where Blame F is on it and you'll just think, where is the actual impact? Like, how is he actually, is he winning these rounds? Or more often than not, it was kind of, hey, they've got a man advantage or a lead, and Nerds is like closing those rounds and getting a lot more of the kills that way. I do agree that, you know, while I might have been speculative of Dexter, I think he can be an elite level player, but I think sometimes he can look like an elite level bag stealer. And I think he still has a lot of questionable decision making in that regard. So, I do think you're picking Heroic at the right time, though. I think they're sort of they're getting through a lot of the slump, and you know, Dexter's had a bit more time, and you know, Kixan, I guess, is, I don't know if it's like an internal system with them, by the way, where they just start trolling once a game is like so far gone, just to like de-tilt before the game is finished. But they seem to sometimes just make some very strange decisions, Kicksan in particular. And yeah, no, I like the Heroic pick. I think they've got good players. I still rate Shush and Tessas very highly. I think Nertz is as well, maybe has a little bit more to unlock. But I think Dexter being more confident and more stable on the AWP is actually allowing for players like Shush to be even more effective. Like if you're fighting somebody further away from a bomb site, the chances of you, I guess, having a disadvantageous gunfight for the anchor that can position themselves a little bit better for their site being attacked, that's where, you know, players like Shush are so good at finding the right spot and getting away with a multi-kill. So yeah, no, I think Heroic is a very sound pick.
It is, and the part I really like about Heroic is, honestly, this turnaround has seen a bit of improvement from Dexter, specifically his numbers, but also a little bit on the eye test. But mostly, it's been so much more assertive and dominant out of Nertz. And that's what you need. He's the star rifler. He needs to play like it. And I think we were completely justified in our criticism of his kind of empty calorie style before. And it's not like he didn't have the opening stats. He just didn't feel like he was actually challenging opponents that heavily. You know, in the key map control fights and a lot of the ways he used to play in teams like Endpoint, you saw him like, you know, key choke points, key battlegrounds. He'd be there swinging, getting the flashbang, getting the multi-kill. And there was a lot more of that at Rio, but then also at Thunder Pick, which, yes, disappointing grand final. No doubt. I mean, I loved it. I picked Ents that event. That worked out beautifully. But no, they are a team who are coming in here on the rise. I kind of called this when I picked them for Rio, basically just said, they're a team who are, as parts, way better than they've played. And the fact that they've figured it out and not completely disbanded, which is usually the two ways these things go, is nice to see. And I think you've picked them at the right moment. Yeah, brilliant pick. Who you got next?
Oh, sorry. You picked them for Elisa, I think, not Thunder Pick, right?
Oh, Elisa.
Yeah.
Whichever one they lost.
Yeah.
It's all Ents. Elisa.
Whichever ones they lost at Ents, yes.
That's the 5, yeah.
There's a bunch of small cups with massive, like, best of 5 finals that I'm just like, did we need this? Like, they have to sit through all of this.
But it's for all the money. For so much money.
I've got to say, though, that Elisa storyline, though, for Ents was pretty insane. So I will give him that. That was kind of wild. But... So I get to go another team making it through, right? Next is my...
Yeah.
Is that... Okay. Well, this one for me, I feel like I've got kind of 2 back-to-back. I feel like slightly slam dunks. I'm going to go Eternal Fire is my next pick. Again, I know there's definitely been kind of the question marks about Eternal Fire, but for me, this is a side that still should waltz through this. It's the super easy argument to make, but they just have one of the best riflers still in kind of EU at the moment with Zantares. I just don't think they're really going to have too much trouble when you head in towards this group, just because they can brute force their way through a lot of games. And a lot of teams that would kind of potentially challenge them, maybe got quite a strong rifle core, or got kind of these individuals who can maybe pop off, at least for Eternal Fire, for the most part, they've got the capacity to be able to kind of break down games. I think what we've seen as well is this side change a lot. I think the only real kind of worry for me at times has just been a little bit of kind of lack of impact from Madra or lack of impact from Kalik. Right, these guys have had their moments where they, I think, go just a tad bit missing for me. But that's the thing, when you've still got Xantares, when you've got Woxic, and even Wakadia, of course, who put up these numbers, I just don't think they're in a really uncomfortable spot for me. So it's such an easy argument to make, but unfortunately, it's kind of the only real one that is the one you go for here, is that, like, when you put them head to head against basically all of these kind of tier 1.5, tier 2 sides, I just don't think they're going to fall flat. They've got the depth of the pool. They've got the individuals to be able to pull them through a lot of tough games. I just don't think really a lot of these sort of tier 2, tier 1.5 teams can compete in that sort of alley, because they have some quite grand pitfalls, which we'll come onto at some point, the way that Eternal Fire really don't. I think the only thing at times is that I feel like mid to late rounds for Eternal Fire can be really scrappy, especially when they're not winning. Or if they lose the man advantage, I feel like they really panic at times. And that's where they do require, like, Xantares, we need you to get 2 here, we need you to get 3, or Woxic, we need you to step up a little bit. But still, against these sort of tier 2 sides, I think they've probably got enough in the locker to be able to do that, even when they would normally be flustered against a top level side.
Oh yeah, I have an issue there, and it's, you kind of touched on it, and that's what I'm going to focus on, is the fact that they do have a weakness when it comes to regathering themselves in a bit of a panic moment. They are very liable to just try to fight their way out of it in moments where you don't need to. When there was always another option, there's another plan. There should be at least another backup plan. And I do feel like they're a little short when it comes to that sort of depth of calling. And they're a team who feel like they have an incredibly high ceiling. We've seen them reach massive event grand finals, but we've also seen them, like at Katowice, lose to Bait in a 2-0, which, like, the scorelines are close. If you're a Eternal Fire fan, you're like, yeah, they had a great game. Not really. The players you want to pop off on Bait didn't play that well. Like, they played fine, but they didn't play like, oh, we're upsetting a big team, look at how much I'm shining. It was just, you got overall outplayed by a team who felt like they were on your level that day, which is a bit of an issue for me if I'm rooting for Eternal Fire. So no, I think they're one of those favorites. Just like 60% of the time I think they make it out. The problem is I hate how big 40% looks here.
Yeah,
I have to go through BO1, like, I'm kind of scared about that.
One of the things that does worry me a little bit, just to add to it, was actually that ESL Challenger Kato performance, just because some of those matches were very, very uncomfortable to watch. It's such an easy sort of thing that a lot of us kind of commentators use at the moment, which is like saving strats for the major. For the most part, I think that's kind of bullshit anyway. I really don't think teams do that to the level that commentators like to kind of bring it up. I think it's such a soft argument to make. I just think they really did look just pretty wank, to be honest. I mean, that Bait loss was in particular bad. You know, congratulations, you beat fucking Falcons. It means absolutely nothing, right? If we're being completely frank. This is a side who've lost, I think I saw a stat, it was like 25 maps in the last 34 they've lost, Falcons. So it means absolutely nothing that Eternal Fire got a 2-0 over them. And that's, for me, really worrying. When you're getting back-to-back losses to Bait, never really kind of where you want to see this sort of side for me. And I think that's just the one main thing that is the thing I've kind of chosen to selectively sort of block out and just hope that it was an off day, an off performance. I'm just going to just tunnel vision and ignore that, because for the most part, everything around that's been okay. Rio was maybe a little bit shaky, sure, but Pro League before that, I think obviously was very good. I think maybe you could say hard done by in that final, but I just, they're never going to compete against Na'Vi, not at the moment. I don't think they have the depth to compete against Na'Vi in this current spot. They have these moments, sure, but I just think when it comes to kind of a deep best of 5, as it did go all 5 in Pro League, that's when they ran out of steam a little bit for me. Thankfully, they're not going to need this in the RMR, so that's where I think they've got enough, right? The only issue that I forgot to add is that I feel like Eternal Fire play up to teams and play down to teams, just because of the nature that they're in. I think they can maybe take things a little bit too lax at times, even if events are big. So I'm hoping there's not one of those where they sort of play down to their opponent and go into the mud and try and kind of brawl them there, because against tier 2, this is their sort of bread and butter.
Yeah, I think when people say saving strats for the major, like they're not saying that like they're gonna play like a total off game and they're not trying to win. It's just they don't do the most complicated stuff they're like rehearsing in practices anymore, like in those types of games. And I think there is some merit to that, but I also think that that's not what Eternal Fire would ever be focusing on, because they're just such like a they're definitely a team that like feel out the rounds, and I just think that Major sometimes just doesn't have the right feeling for it, unfortunately. I also, yeah, I don't really know how to feel about this team because I think they are very exciting at times, but it just always comes in bursts and waves, and I just don't know that this Major is going to be the right time for them. That said, there's so much chaff in this RMR that they should just get through it. Like, I mean, their opening round against Aurora is, it depends which Aurora turns up in that opening best of one. And even if they beat them, then they're gonna have a really hard time, I think, against some of the other teams in the 1-0 column. So that's maybe why I would be a little bit reserved to pick them. I still probably would have them going through though.
Yeah, more likely than not, just there's a scary amount of not possible, which is just my one reservation.
More likely like a 3-1 team than a 3-0 team, you know what I mean? That kind of vibe.
Yeah, maybe 3-2, but they have a scary set of BO3s lined up, like some ugly wins that you're like, you guys got through, but shape
also,
up.
3-2 is rough because it's not even like you're guaranteed to go through anymore. You have to like play the 7/8 decider now.
Yeah, an extra step, an extra layer of difficulty, complication, sweat on the brow. But all right, speaking of sweat on the brow, I've got to make a pick here. I think I might take our first underdog of the show. You know what? Yeah, I believe the little captain that could, the forgotten man who had no one to eat breakfast with. He's back. I'm picking Bait. NPL, one of my latest prospects, one of my favorite prospects to watch in a long time. And something I discovered only very late into the process of making that video, the IGL of the team. For some reason, it took me like straight up a month.
We've spoken about that before.
Where I was just like, oh my god, he's been calling this entire time. So I'm watching a player who's, and this is what's going to make it so amazing. Like, he's a rotator playing these huge, like, very important map control, like, positions, fighting a lot, brawling, but also somehow calling the shots on the CT side. Then on T side, of course, being the star rifler of the roster, the main star rifler. I was like, how the hell does he have time to also call everything? So I put a little caveat in the video, like, surely someone's helping, but if they aren't, this is just incredible. This is absolutely incredible. What a little monster. But the overall strength of the roster is more than just NPL. As much as I love to sing his praise and bring up the whole, Na'Vi storyline, the history, the redemption arc, I do think there is more to this roster than just the little IGL that I am so fascinated by. There's the rifle core isn't that crazy. Like, guys like Alex666 and Zenthiel and Captain Kirka all can play good quality Counter-Strike and have their rounds. I mean, Captain Kirka had his series in like Katowice and other big matches where he's just magically just stepped up. You're like, oh crap, yeah, I remember this guy. You were the guy who gave everyone issues on the last Bait roster. Like, alongside Owner and Ringle, you were also actually pretty good back then. Well, on this iteration, he's also been able to find his stride a couple of times, but Headtrick is the second redemption arc story, and the fact that the swap between him and Wrinkle activated both, allowed both of them to reach probably a higher level than they ever had on their respective teams, was pretty cool. I think Wrinkle actually kind of might be the one who's getting worse off here. I think at this specific event, I think Headtrick has a better chance of going through than Wrinkle, which might be a bit rough. So as much as I'd love to make a Jared Goff, Matthew Stafford analogy, it doesn't quite work just because of how bad NIP have been. NFL fans will get that 100%. Headtrick has been amazing for these guys, even if he isn't in a lot of ways the super impactful, super dynamic sort of AWPer that you expect from a young sort of prodigal talent. He does still play a rather reserved style. He at least has a better setup here, and I think more confidence in himself to find the right fights, and it's really come and bearing fruit for this team. That big win over Eternal Fire can't be overstated for them as a roster at a actual LAN event. To get that sort of win is going to be a huge boost of confidence. I see them as favourites against all the underdogs, and I think they've got a puncher's chance against a good number of those high-ranked favourites, which really they shouldn't have given the ranking disparity. So I think this is a high-value underdog pick with a good chance to make it through.
Yeah, you want to go first now?
I'm happy to. I love Bait Ball, man. I said it, actually, Mike can maybe vouch for me here, but I said it quite a few times in the green room when we came in. I mean, I did say it arguably a little bit jokingly, but I kept saying, "Oh, I love bait ball," and I kept joking saying bait are winning the whole event. Now it was tongue in cheek when I first said it. Then they made it to the final. I was like, "Oh my god, bait are actually fucking winning the event."
And then what they do in that
and
final?
then they fucking bottled it, and they give me the worst fucking final of all time. Oh my god, they absolutely screwed me. I finally get to cast the final. I've done like 7 or something challenger events at this point now. First time gets to a final, I'm pumped, and I get the shittest game of the tournament. So that was unfortunate, but
ups and downs, Elisa, then Kato.
Yeah,
so,
exactly. But at the very least. For me, I've been such a huge fan of Bait. I mean, I even liked Bait all the way back when they had Wrinkle and stuff. The only issue is, and this is a kind of a dumb thing, which I think maybe they might be over now. Someone can confirm. I got told this. I don't 100% know if it's true, but from my understanding, Bait have the worst record when it comes to major qualification games of any team ever. Right? I think they're like 0.
Yeah, that could be possible.
They're 0-6 because in back-to-back RMRs, I think it was Rio, because I remember doing them at Rio, and then Blast Paris, they went 2-0 up and then lost every best of 3 off the back of it. So I'm pretty sure someone said it was to me. This is a long time ago now, so it could have changed. But yeah, they had the worst qualification rate. They're 0-6 in qualification best of 3s for the major. Both ones have gone like 2-0 up and then fucked it. So that's one thing, and maybe a kind of mental block where they're like, okay, we've done so well to get ourselves here. We've just got to do one more best of 3. But obviously, when you're in that 2-0 game, you're always going to come against some of the big hitters. And if Bait do end up getting there again, right, they're going to play against one of probably Spirit or G2. It's a tough best of 3. Do they have the depth for it? We've kind of seen that at times maybe they don't, right? And that is kind of one of the issues for me. I think this is a side who, when they play up against some of these better sides, I mean, the prime example, of course, is that Challenger Kato game, right, where they completely fell apart against Saw. And Saw obviously were going through all of their own kind of personal crisis. Agil coming in. They weren't even playing with their coach. They were playing with their analyst who was standing in. I forget his name now, but he's a random guy was standing in as their coach for Challenger Kato. And that's the thing, we kind of see these spotty games, or like, for example, another one is Heroic, Elisa Esper, right? They just kind of got moved aside in that best of 3, and it wasn't really even close. I mean, that Anubis in particular, I'm not sure if you guys any of you caught it, but it was an absolute massacre. There was a complete no-show coming through, and in particular, the real issue was that when Bait needed them most, the 2 heroes, Headtrick, MPL, both went completely missing. I mean, Headtrick had an absolutely abhorrent series because Dexter pocketed him, and that's maybe one of these things that's the only caveat. I love Bait, and I'm absolutely with you. I think the team will make it through, and I'm a really big fan of them. And I really, really hope they do. I mean, what a redemption it would be for like MPL, who had to get flamed for months sitting next to Simple, and Headtrick, who your time on NIP doesn't count. But it is one of those where I love the side. I just think they have this one key worry for me, that if MPL and Headtrick go missing, which they do occasionally in a couple of series, because strong AWPers make them feel uncomfortable. A strong rifling core will overwhelm them too. That's when I feel like they get, for me, a little flat. I mean, in that Challenger Kato final, they completely checked out. Their mental boomed, right? You could just tell, tilted, 0 communications as well. I mean, they didn't call any tack pauses in that second map. They just let it roll through, and half of them were just force buying, and you can see on the cameras none of them are talking. So that's the one thing that worries me. They don't really have that super experienced player on this side. I mean, even the players who have played at tier 1, they're all young, right? MPL being that caller, Headtrick, of course, as well. But they're all youngsters. So that's the one thing that worries me a little bit. Is just they have this young, dynamic core, which is super cool when they're playing well, but when they're playing bad, I think they get into a little bit of a rut. But they fixed a lot of key issues for me that when I've been following this side, have been a problem. I think the main one was Ascentia. To put it lightly, back in 2023, he was absolutely abhorrent. He was so bad. He was just bad at Counter-Strike. It was as simple as that. He was averaging a below a 0.8 rating for the entire year. He was a complete weakness in this side. And he's actually now just doing his role, which is all you can ask for him. You got Alex actually now stepping up in big games as well. And against very solid rifling cores. He's actually looking really comfortable, very confident, happy to take fights, happy to kind of rely on his own sort of mechanics. So I like Bait. I think they've got a few things to overcome. But again, in this sort of RMR, because there is so many weaker sides, I think Bait actually can be considered one of the real strong ones. And for me, a raw underdog. So I'd love to see them make it to the major.
Yeah, I think Well, NPL has basically just gone through like a whole villain arc. Like both Simple and Blade bullied him so much on his time at Navi. And you know, some of that's just lighthearted bullying, like Blade on the ESL Pro League couch being asked, "What was the biggest risk you've taken in your career?" And he said, "Picking up you." And he looked at NPL. You know, like you have just like weird subtle jabs that I think did have NPL entering his villain arc, and I'm here for it. Like I'd be so happy if this team made it through. I think they're probably the strongest underdog that we have in terms of like consistency and what we've seen from proper roster growth. I do think, like you said, like they have problems translating that into games that really matter, and maybe that does hurt them in the side of, you know, they have a coach that basically has no actual playing experience. Like he's a career coach that isn't like a veteran player, can't ground you or set you up in reality. Like seeing them at that Kato final, I think they did just think this was just going to be another game, and I don't think anyone brought them into the idea like, guys, this is the final. Like you need to like really lock the fuck in. And instead, everyone's just so out of it. So I think that the weakness for them is maybe on the coaching staff side, or you know, maybe having like a spiritual or emotional leader, something outside of an NPL who's like, I mean, he's a young guy, so it's his first time in that type of a role as well. He doesn't, you know, I think he has grown up, but I'd find it hard to believe that he's immediately like a leader of men straight away. So that's my only concern. I think you've touched on quite a lot of what I have to say about this team already. Like they're exciting, they're fun, and you know, I'm here for the big nipple.
Yeah. Sometimes the kids play like kids; they fall apart, and that's how it is. But I like the story. Yumi, you now have back-to-back picks. Oh, it's getting short. The list of teams you want to pick are getting real short.
Well, that's the thing. Like even before we did these shows, I just like went through the RMR and I'm like, these are the teams I think we'll go through. Just like taking them at face value, right? So I had, you know, G2, I had Spirit, I had Eternal Fire, I had Heroic, I had Bait, and now I guess I just have to pick the other two teams that I have left because you can only pick 7. So, first one I'm going to touch on is Astralis. I think Astralis are a decent pick, even though, you know, they may be cheating or whatever at the last full finals. I Am Rio was not a bad showing for them all in all, considering the limited runtime they had with Cadian as an in-game leader, and then last World Finals was a lot better. Like they are also a team that I think are trying to lean into the idea of, hey, we're not going to get it all together in time for the major, so let's hard prac Vertigo and force teams that aren't banning it in first rounds to be very concerned about that. Especially when you're looking at, I mean, best of ones, it shouldn't really matter, but when we start thinking about qualifying games, they may just pull the wool over the eyes of some teams that just don't get quality practice on that map. And I've said the same thing about Sangal, who are like a good tier 2 team on Vertigo. I find it very perplexing to think like how do these guys get quality practice on Vertigo? Like who is, because there aren't actually a lot of top teams that are pracking it. It's just all like middling tier 2 teams that are all trying to find their edge. And maybe that's enough actually for them. So but I think this Astralis team has come back together. I think Cadian is definitely the Stound Whisperer. Like his performance is immediately upticked. Device and Cadian themselves are maybe a little uncomfortable. I don't know that, and I think this was my concern immediately when Cadian came in. And I know I will say this to you, T, but I'm not sure that Cadian knows how to call when he's not on the AWP and like taking space away. And it's not like he's gonna micro call for for Device to say, "Nah, bro, stop moving, stay where you are." We made it to top 1, and what did you do? Oh, sorry, you won all those majors. My bad. So that's concerning, but I think they're putting aside their differences. I still think there is maybe some like back-ended hatred towards one another, but I think they're putting aside their differences and trying to get their shit together for the major in time. And I think that's exactly what I want from a professional esports team, to be honest. I don't care if you like each other, just play the fucking game. They're doing a better job than the Falcons in building super teams.
I guess that's what I'd say on that last little statement. But for the most, I mean, I expressed this opinion on the Asia RMR show, which for some reason was controversial, but I'm going to repeat it again. I kind of don't believe in this team at all, but I do believe in them here. So that's the big differentiator for me, because Astralis, in a group stage, when it kind of matters, but there's no one watching you, making it feel like it matters. Certain individuals on that team know what that feels like. They are, I mean, historically, statistically, one of the best teams to have ever touched the video game. If you look at their run when they start off with Devices and IGL, Stabby have just joined. They are one of the all-time great Counter-Strike teams, even when you include how much they shit the bed once they reach the stage. So their group stage performances were that insanely explosive, dynamic, performant, just steamrolling people. That the fact that they then got steamrolled when it mattered still made them look historically good. So they're going to get through here, and they're going to do it in rampant fashion. They're going to pick Vertigo when they can and win it, but in the BO1s and in the other maps, in those BO3s, which I think they're only going to play one of those, they are just going to be like, oh, you gave us a Mirage kind of map. You gave us a map like that with kind of a middle ground. But look, we have, at this moment in time, no stage, no pressure, 2 riflers who are going to play like the best riflers in the world, and a Norpa who can play like he's up there with the best all of a sudden. You know, win crazy clutches, hit the little flicks that usually doesn't on the big stage, as I've noticed recently. They are a completely different beast when the lights aren't that bright, and the only people who can see you have a camera in front of their face. So I'm not worried at all about Astralis. I think they were a slam dunk pick to go through, despite the fact that I don't think they're going to win this event. I think the moment we even get to the opening stage, there's that 3,000 crowd of Chinese guys who are like, oh, finally another Counter-Strike event, and this one matters. Everyone's going to be there. They might fall apart at that point. Here, easy breezy. They're going to smash it.
Yeah, I can't disagree. I mean, I just feel like for Astralis, it feels like a bit of a no-brainer. Even when I did sort of my own list on my podcast, they were kind of a slam dunk for me. I don't think there's really any worries. The only one that is maybe a slight caveat is like what's going on with like Cadian's elbow. He's like broken his elbow or something, right? Which is like kind of weird. Like, you know, he's broken his elbow. And then I saw a couple of people talking about this, like, why are you playing Blast World Finals then if you've got like a broken elbow or whatever? Why are you aggravating this injury without resting it? But they seem to do okay. It didn't seem to affect him. He actually played pretty decent at times.
He's on a rifle. Come on, Snacks can win multiple big events with a .85. Cadian can play with a broken arm. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, like, exactly. Up the sense by that .2, mate. Play with the wrist. You'll be all right. But it is one of those where it's like, I mean, that's the only kind of small thing. But I'm with you. You kind of touched on all the points that I want to say. But it's, once again, unfortunately, the really easy argument with Group B is just like there is a lot of trough of shit in this group that they just will beat with raw firepower. Like even the teams that are kind of close to them ranking wise, I don't think actually even really are comparable, arguably at the moment. Like maybe you can make a bit of an argument for Big to a degree, but then you like dip below that and talk about kind of your 3D Maxes. I don't think they compete your Auroras, NIPs, etc. So that for me is where I look at this and just say, I think Astralis should surefire be in that 7. Whereabouts they are in that 7, obviously, is up for debate, but I don't think they should break too much of a sweat. I'm with you. Like, maybe at most lose like 1 best of 3.
All right.
Back to me. No, it's back to you again, isn't it?
It's still me. Yeah. Also, I'm having like weird connection issues at the minute, so I don't know if that's like coming through at all, but
seems okay.
Yeah, all right. So
we can just blame any delay, any awkward pause, any dead air. We should be like, oh, there's connection issues, man. It's just the connection issues, you know.
No, I have to like interpolate what the hell you're saying. Like half the time, it became a little confusing. But as long as I already made my point, it didn't really matter. I have just kind of realized that the other team I was maybe thinking about picking, I can't because I've already picked 2 favorites. So
yep, underdogs.
I am in the underdogs. God, I hate what sucks about this is that I really want to pick this team, but I haven't watched tons of their games. I've just seen that they can be good. And I guess that might have to be enough.
I know who you're picking, I think. Oh no.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm thinking about picking Passion UA.
Yep.
Yes, my fucking
yeah. This is the thing. I haven't watched tons of it. I think what has me interested in this team is one, it's another like full Ukrainian squad, which is like, it's kind of interesting because we have Bait and Passion UA are in and around the same time, which is, I think maybe the first time ever we've had like 2 kind of compelling tier 2 like full national squads from Ukraine that have actually looked good. And I think as a player, and if I'm not mistaken, Kohler Fear is right on this team.
Yeah,
he's, I think, always kind of captured me as an interesting player for development that maybe thought should have gotten a chance, and this is So far, from what I can tell from the games or the results that I've seen, they seem to be doing pretty good. So, I don't really have a lot to lean on here aside from I think Fear is quite interesting. I think what is it? The Jambo also seems to be like a pretty interesting prospect for the region, and so I'm just kind of here for that. Now, I'm not going to pretend like their matchups are going to be that crazy in their favor, but they do have Virtus Pro in the first round, and I've noticed none of us have been picking them because confidence is at an all-time low, and I even thought about picking them. I'm like, Virtus Pro, yeah, I mean they've got so much firepower.
You love the Virtus Pro pick.
I know I do. Even though recently I have not touched them, and I will remain. They will remain untouched. We're going with Passion UA instead. Just screw those bears. All the passion.
You want to take this one, T, and I'll go after you.
Yeah, let's see what I have, because I have done demo reviews specifically on Jambo and Jacasmo. I have watched a good amount of this team play. And it's interesting because they're another full Ukrainian team who are also led by an IGL who takes a lot of the sort of firepower load. Not anywhere near as much as MPL, but still a good amount relies on Fear being able to frag out. And the reason I felt like you were going towards this pick, but when I looked through my list of teams, I crossed them out as a team I would not be picking because I don't feel like their win conditions are set up correctly here. Like, this is a team who are very young, whose IGL has never really called on LAN, needs to frag, but also needs to set up Jacasmo, who's even younger than him and less experienced and very, very fresh to even middling level play, let alone top level play. There's a lot of things that concern me there. Now, Jambo is undeniably a talent. Like, he's probably in tier 2. Like, I'm struggling to think of an AWPer who I'd rather try and promote at this point. Like, there's very few on the list who have been better and more consistent than Jambo. So that's the one upside I think they have. The other upside is, of course, that VP matchup you mentioned. They start with a very good chance at a 1-0, but I'm just not sure I fully believe in Fear's ability to get this group of players through this sort of difficult and, I guess, stressing of an environment. They've been amazing online. They've been grinding. They're one of those teams where you can point to, like, this is the trend. If you want to be in online CS and do well, you have to play. You just keep on playing. And eventually it starts getting better and better as you start to click. You start to understand how to really adapt your play to this environment, how to be in a team if you're a group of young guys. Grinding the officials is what matters. And they have done that. And full credit to them for making it this far. I just think not this event for you. The next one, it might be. Maybe if you can qualify for some more lands, I think then we got a real conversation. Hell, if the We Play Academy League was still around, some org just buy this team as your academy and just be like, here you go. Like, this is an Academy League team that needs a few of those reps. I just think they're a little too raw and unproven, even if I love the talent here.
Yeah,
sorry, just to jump back in, I'm just scrolling through some of their games. I'm just like, what is their seeding for these online games? They're playing some of like the weak. I'm like discrediting my own pick here, but I swear they've played some of like the weakest teams in these CCTs. Like, I'm like, what was their seeding that favorable that they're always getting like the noobs? I'm actually a little perplexed why they.
I think so. I think they do. They do normally go in quite highly seeded in tournaments. The only issue is sometimes, they've struggled converting some of these sort of CCTs as well. I mean, I remember that loss against Gamer Legion. Like, Gamer Legion finally broke their streak of losing CCT finals to beating Passion UA. But I will say, I like the Passion UA pick. I put them on my list as like an underdog. They weren't in my like initial sort of top 7, but they were actually the argument that I was essentially making for, Misha and Paladin. I think we were sort of talking about it. VP ended up sneaking through. I don't like VP personally at the moment, so Passion UA were like the next in line for me. But I think if we're talking about underdogs, the big debate is essentially for me between two. I think it's between Passion UA and between 9 Pandas, because 9 Pandas were until today on a real good hot streak. Like 10 matches in a row, they were kind of on a bit of fire until they lost to Aurora today 2-1. But still, they were picking up pretty good wins against a pretty decent sides. We were talking about kind of teams like 9, Johnny Speeds, etc. But I think one in particular that I really did like from them was that win against Navi Junior. Now, many people might not even know Navi Junior, but their side are unfucking real. They are so good. Makaze seems like one of the best young talents we've got in Counter-Strike at the moment. People keep talking about Kaisuke, who obviously is fantastic as well, but Makaze should be in and around those conversations as well. He is seriously talented. He's already won FPL a couple of times. Individually, mechanically, incredible. And they took him down actually with relative ease. And I think That's for me where we're seeing the side actually showcase just how good they are and sort of what level they're at. So for me, it felt like the debate between Nine Pandas and Passion UA, but I personally actually lent a little bit in favor of Passion UA over Nine Pandas. I think Nine Pandas have their issues where, for example, if Wrestle doesn't show up, I think they really struggle firepower-wise at times. For Passion UA, I think Jambo, you kind of touched on it too, that he's sort of, I think, one of the best AWPers in Tier 2. The only AWPer that I think who has a higher skill ceiling, who is exclusively Tier 2, is actually Deco. I think that's probably the only guy. I think when Deco's on his day, I think he is probably,
on his day, I'll give you that. I'll give you that on his day.
I think his ceiling's high, but I think his floor's lower. It's probably the way to put it, especially at the moment. Yeah. But I think, he's talking about fucking retiring at 23 from CS. So I think mentally he's just not all there. Where this Jambo guy is locked in. They play a lot of Counter-Strike. I think Fear's calling style I really do like, because it's like refreshingly puggy. And I can't, you kind of touched on it. You don't really call these guys. I thankfully got to cast Pashua a bunch of times this year. It's, sometimes, when you're waking up for like a 9 a.m. UK cast, it's like, a bit still half asleep or whatever. Passion UA play, exciting, fun Counter-Strike. It's up in your face. It can be really enjoyable, really puggy. And against some decent sides as well. They just catch them off guard with raw aggression. Like, they do things which would be seen in sometimes as a little bit audacious, or even sometimes just kind of clearly a bit dumb. But it works. Jacasmo is such a talent himself as well, that I think they kind of bail themselves out on mechanics. But I think this sort of fresh approach in terms of really quick, quite aggressive, especially on the CT side as well, they really like to take a lot of initiative, more so than a lot of other teams in and around them. I remember kind of doing a direct comparison between themselves and Sinners. Sinners like to play incredibly passive on their CT side, sit back, actually not take a lot of map control. Passion UA do the exact opposite. A lot of map control, a lot of early fights, a lot of information, then they adapt. And I think that's probably, I would say, akin to Fear in terms of his upbringing as an IGL. He played on the Witches for a little bit, of course, that mixed team. But primarily, a lot of Fear's calling experience is coming through places like FPL, where you're playing with kind of on-the-fly calls, you're adapting. And I think at the moment, that suits the sort of Counter-Strike meta. It is very much adapt on the fly. Calling out of spawns, as a lot of these kind of older style IGLs do in Tier 2, doesn't work as well anymore because of how weird and rampant the Counter-Strike can be. So that's where I think, for me, for Passion UA, I wouldn't say they're a lock-in. I wouldn't say, but as underdogs go, I really actually like this pick, because I think they can sneak wins here in the same way that like Bait in previous RMRs have snuck wins. I remember them getting a pretty good one over Fnatic on Ancients back in the Rio RMR. Games like that where they can like sneak a best of one. That's where I think actually Passion UA might have something up their sleeve. They've got a pretty decent pool, a lot of reps under their belt, and they've just got like those individuals who can step up in a big moment. Jambo in particular is going to be the main one. And with how weak some of the AWPers are around them, I do actually think they've got a good chance of just utilizing him alone.
Yeah, I mean, it was basically between Nine Pandas and Passion UA for me. And I think it was more, I'd rather pick the Devil I Don't than the Devil I Do Know, because I think I look at the calling on Nine Pandas sometimes, I just think it's so, like, it's stiff, it's rigid, and I don't think they look comfortable in like the way that they adapt in their mid rounds.
I will say,
I've watched a lot of that team, and I think they're interesting, but yeah, they've got their problems.
Just for Nine Pandas as well, everyone's got these like massive like rose-tinted glasses with them at the moment. It's like, 10-match winning streak, which it means absolutely nothing heading in towards the RMR. And I think a lot of people as well, they just keep seeing like 10 matches in a row and just not looking at actually the size that they're beating. Like, no offense to my boys, right? But they're beating Verdant, right? It doesn't mean a lot, right? It's UK teams, semi-pros. They're beating teams like, Fireflux. I don't even know who Fireflux are. I watch a lot of Counter-Strike. Who the hell are they? So I think that's the thing for me. It's like, people, I think, are really not looking into the nuance of the teams they are beating and the caliber of teams. I mean, if you look at them, I'm just checking now, I don't think any of them are even RMR level teams. Yeah, none of them are. So it's like, and when they are facing teams that are RMR level teams, Dano Eklot, that was one of their losses. Aurora, another loss. Before that, Saw, a loss. So that's the issue that I think people are having with Nine Pandas. They've got this like real rosy view of saying like, oh, this side are on a real good streak and they're playing great Counter-Strike. They're not beating good teams though, and that's the difference. They're kind of doing what we as sports fans like to call like the preseason warm-up. I'm a Liverpool fan. We go and just like smack up like some random team in like League 2, 8-0 win, get the confidence up, heading towards the Premier League season with all flying. That, I feel like that's sort of what Nine Pandas are doing at the moment. But whether that works with the RMR, I actually do doubt a little bit.
It's MMA streak, isn't it? So
yeah.
Yeah, we'll see if anyone picks them. Because it's on to me to pick a team, and at this point, it'd be literally silly to waste a pick on a favourite, because you guys can't pick any. So I'm going to take a look I had these underdogs, and I've got some decisions to make. I've got on my list some teams just crossed out. NIP, no thank you. Sashi, no thank you. Just for me, these are teams I can't argue in favor of. I don't think I could make that good a case. I also have Parivision crossed out, but also with a bunch of question marks. I'm not sure what I was thinking about there. I have a very borderline serial killer way of going through these options with just red ink just scrawled over a group of pictures. But I'm going to go with the lowest ranked team here. I did this in Asia. I'm doing this in EU RMR B. I'm taking TSM. And partially, it's just because you guys... I was torn between them and 9Pandas, but you guys seem so anti-9Pandas. I'm going to leave them there for you. And I'm going to take TSM, who are a team I am a big fan of for mostly one reason. But we'll get into the full spectrum of who they are as a roster right now. TSM, when this project came together, the Danish version of this project, because obviously we remember when TSM re-enter the Counter-Strike scene, it's with this big triumphant announcement talking about how they have got their scouts in place. They got a guy out here in Europe looking at the best talents in Counter-Strike, and the team they assemble is fucking horrible. To put it politely, it was one of the worst ideas I'd ever seen written down. That sort of runs around a bit. It gets very messy. Joel plays there. Quirtz appears. Like, if you're running a mixed team that's not going to do very much of anything in Tier 2, these are the sorts of players that kind of pop in and out of your storyline. Right now, they rebuild to Danish, and it starts looking a lot better. Firstly, they take Xiphon out of the doldrums. They put him in roles that make sense for not only his skill set, but the current meta of how Counter-Strike is played. In CSGO, it made sense the way Hooksy used Xiphon. Xiphon was a sort of mid to late round contact walk player who you just let slowly go into a fight and bang heads off because of his crosshair placement being so sublime. In CS2, you do not waste rifle talents shift walking slowly out into mid on Ancient, for example. You make them swing things. You let them take a high volume of opening frags. You force them to re-peek. You make them that sort of aggressive playmaker. And that's what TSM did when they made this team full Danish, and it unlocked so much potential for them. Not only did Xiphon's stats go fucking skyrocketing, but also the fact they had experienced players around him, and players who knew how to finish rounds meant they started winning a lot of games. And that's been huge for TSM. They've won a lot in Tier 2, not recently, but historically with this roster. And I think a lot of it has come down to, I'm not going to say saving strats for the major. I just think they're a team with so many guys who are very experienced and know what they want in this life, that once they qualified for this RMR, they were very fixated on it. Guys like Valde, Acor, Nico even. These guys are not bothered about online CS. Sure, they know they have to do it, and the grind is there, but this is what it means for them. They've not managed to get to the pinnacle, really, in their careers. Previously, they've now got a star build around, and they're making it work. The final piece of the puzzle they added was Syra, a much-needed addition, because Altex, it just didn't quite ever mesh. They brought in Syra, one of the final pieces to be taken from Mouse NXT before they entered this full rebuild. And I think they're a very threatening team who are going to be very overlooked coming into this event. I'm a huge Xiphon fan. That's what inspired the pick. But when you look down the roster, and I think their historic ability to win games in a variety of ways, this is going to be a threatening squad.
See, I like this team when it first did the Danish rebuild, because they were surprisingly very well rehearsed and very clean executes, very clean map control takes, everything, so long as it was on the flow chart of we need to do this, this, and this to do to get to where we want to be. They were actually very, very good. And I think the first thing I ID'd with them was that if there's any team that plays aggressive on their CT sides, TSM just lose. They actually they have no contingency plans. They don't adapt very well. And I think that's where weirdly, that's why I trust Sierra as an addition to this roster, because that Mouse NXT team were chugging through a lot of online officials where you have to play a lot of teams like that, and where TSM were losing to the likes of Guild News Eagles, even though that team was ass by the time they were finished. I think they needed a guy like Sierra that actually can make those more, I guess, intuitive on the fly decisions where Valde isn't or isn't sort of calling the strat ahead of what could be good timing for Sierra or Xiphon to make use of. And I think as much as I don't know the internal dynamics of this team, I imagine Sierra is actually maybe telling the squad not to go forward with the execute for like a couple of seconds. Like maybe have like a bit of leeway to make a play before things happen. So I don't hate the pick. I think the only thing is that in practice that's what this should be. But in reality, in the recent officials for TSM, it's just not looked great. And that's where I put my questions about whether or not they need to make further changes before this team is even ready to compete at this type of a level. So, but I mean, the fact they're all Danish, they all come from like system-based teams. They have a very good floor, and they got that floor very quickly. But the teams at this event are going to be aggressive. Like they are going to push your shit in, and I think TSM could still have some problems with that.
Yeah, I actually kind of like this team, but I think it's kind of the point you're touching on. They were good when they first came together, and they've really dwindled recently. The one thing that also worries me is that they actually haven't played a lot of Counter-Strike recently, too. Like, their last official was, like, nearly a month ago now, and I think in some cases that can be good. I don't think leading up to the RMR it is. You know, all of these like scrims and pracs and the boot camps that they're probably doing are one thing, but I always feel like officials are the best way to get reps in ready for a tournament like the RMR and get yourself feeling fresh. Like it's a completely different mind and kind of I guess headspace to be in when you're heading in towards a big tournament like an RMR and you're not playing a lot of officials, because you can just be a little bit cold in terms of what your mental state actually has to be. So that is one thing that worries me. And even then, when they were playing officials too, some of those losses were pretty bad, it has to be said. So I don't know. I if this was like when this team first got brought to the table, I'm a huge fan. I'm an advocate. I like this team. Syrah was like this talent I caught back doing a Blast premier like showdown qual, basically. He was playing for a team called Proserpia, and he just farmed out of nowhere. And I think back in like 2022, I put him in like my ones to watch for the year, I think it was. And I put him like number 3. And then a year later gets put on Mars NXT, does really, really solidly there. And then, of course, gets the move to TSM, which I think was kind of the right move for him, playing with kind of, I would say, you know, top level players from his region in kind of that were around and available building in that tier 2. It's just, unfortunately, I don't think they've lived up to the name value at the moment. You know, hovering in around 80th in the world is okay, but I just think I like the team. I like the style of Counter-Strike they play. It seems like they've got a really good head for the game, but unfortunately at times, they've just looked a little off in recent months. I think I caught them once in like Challenger League right towards the end, like 3D Max, I think it was. And yeah, they just really looked all over the shop at times. And that's maybe the thing that worries me. And maybe it's a little bit of recency bias of the one game that I caught them very, very recently. But I like them just if it was like 6 months ago rather than right now.
Yeah, I'm entirely convinced, because if you look at their results, look at the moment they qualify for the RMR, look how little they produce ever since. I 100%, I'm telling you, these old dogs have overlooked every game they've played since in anticipation for this. They've given themselves this huge boot camp. They might have overdone it. They might have, you know, as you say, they might have created a lot of ring rust by avoiding playing officials. But that's why I've not followed their online form since, because I watched a few games, I read a few faces, I thought, they're not going to be very interesting for now. This is a team I have to wait on. I'm going to have to wait on before I get excited again. And I'm ready to pick them. So
listen, you haven't got the major money yet. Like, come on, you still need to earn your paycheck. Like, what do we do? What are we saying? Like, oh, sorry, all those online officials for like tens of thousands of dollars. Whatever, man. We're just treating it like practice. Who cares? Who cares? We're a new team. We got all the excuses in the world. If that is true, I hate it. So.
No, it's fair, and it is something that maybe we should not be so chill with, but for me it is very much it might not be fun for the young guys, but for the older players I think it does have to be kind of like
prioritized.
Not necessarily a conscious, like openly expressed decision, but it kind of is sort of all right, prac starts becoming more about the games being the practice, and then we start talking about how we're rebuilding ourselves, prioritizing Syrah's ideas. We've got a lot of it becomes about that other prep, and I think that's been a real issue. I think for a couple other teams as well, who I've noticed towards the RMR have just dwindled, taken huge losing streaks into the RMR, have taken like month-and-a-half breaks. I think that for a lot of teams it's become all about getting to the sticker stage, essentially. I think TSM are an extreme example, but one I have a lot of faith in. All right, we're back to the Ne0Kai double pick.
So yeah, okay.
Underdogs
Now,
galore. Tell me which one you love, because you've been talking down
yeah.
about a lot of these teams.
Well, this is one of the things I thought we should go top 7. I don't know, because 9 Pandas would be a good one here, but I'm actually still sticking without going the 9 Pandas pick just to keep it spicy. I'm gonna go. There's 2 ways I could go about this, but since I've got 2 picks, I can probably just kind of chain them off back to back. But the one I'm probably gonna throw out here next, if I'm assuming as an underdog, 3D Max don't count, is my assumption. I feel like
they are a favorite. Yep.
Yeah, they don't count because of Valve ranking, and even though they made it through the qualifier, Big, I'm assuming also don't count as an underdog either. But yeah, that was my assumption. So my next one I'm gonna actually throw out here is Sashi. Now, I don't love this team in terms of like I don't actually genuinely believe they can make it through, but just to kind of speak on some of the things I do like out for them, I think they've got a few individuals that have been putting up very decent numbers. I think one guy that gets unsung quite a lot is actually Cabby on this team. I think as a rifler, he's been looking actually pretty solid in all fairness, especially when at times they need a little bit more. I think Mr. still hasn't lived up to sort of his sort of name value in a way on this side. Lucky, obviously, as an AWPer, especially in tier 2, has been pretty solid as well. So at least for me, I like what I see there. But I think one of the reasons that I did want to kind of throw out Sashi there is because they just seem to have this weird thing where it's like, right, when we have to qualify to a LAN, we just lock in. Like, we saw them do it for Yala, we saw them do it for EWC, and then potentially, well, now they don't have the RMR, and we could even see them go a little bit further heading in towards the major. Now, granted, very, very doubtful, but they just seem to be a side who, I think the big thing for them is they're incredibly well prepped when they come in towards games. You can definitely tell they've obviously got that kind of support staff with them. Love him or hate him, Hunden's obviously doing a lot of work in the background, right? You can, say what you want about Sashi and say what you want about him in particular, but it's safe that it's safe to say that he's obviously doing a hell of a lot of work because especially when they play against top teams and good sides, you can actually tell that they've got very good reads into sort of what they're playing. It's actually the big thing that lets them down is like, do we actually have the individuals to be able to kind of capitalize on all this information? Like, okay, they've thrown these bits of util, so we know what they're doing. And I've cast them a couple of times recently, and you can see like they're super well, they're super good at kind of reacting to information. Be like, right, this is this default that they do where they're setting up for a B hit or whatever. But then unfortunately, they have times where, I think like for example, like you can maybe talk about Iceberg, but as a caller, we're not really going to look at him in the numbers guy. But I think Quez really does go missing quite a lot as somebody who's meant to pull a little bit of his weight in the server as part of this kind of rifling core. I've already kind of touched on Mr. too, and that's where the only thing that I worry about with Sashi, I feel like they've got good prep, and I feel like their opening game against Big, there's maybe a world in which they can read into them. Big played a lot of Counter-Strike at the moment, and that's something where they can prep for them, but it's just, can they actually capitalize? Do they have the individuals to be able to do so? That's the big thing that lets them down. Maybe the one argument you can make is that even though Searson's form recently has been good, if he just goes for a dip, then who knows, right? Then maybe potentially Lucky could out-open, but I still think it's unlikely.
I'm a little worried we may have lost T here.
You haven't lost me. I'm here in audio, but my side of the cameras has crashed.
Oh.
And now I'm in a separate room alone, and it doesn't seem to want to re-add it. Okay, I'm back on my screen. I'm now in the recording again. Oh, okay, now everyone else has appeared on my screen. Yeah, that just randomly disappeared. But no, I heard everything, don't you worry. And now I get to do my favorite thing, which is talk shit about this particular group of Danish players. Because what a waste of perfect prep every time I watch these guys.
Yeah.
For me, a long time ago, now I resent when this happens, because I've been doing prospects for like 4 years. And of course, that means a lot of people decide to go, they try to like be like, I like this guy. You should like talk about this guy, make a video about this guy. And that means, okay, if I know this person or I like this person, I'd go watch the demos. I give them the benefit of the doubt. And I was told to like, Cabby was the next guy. And I watched the demos. I was like, fuck no, he isn't. I'm sorry. I was just like, no, he's not. And I've been right. I mean, his teams keep winning because he's playing in these very well organized, structured, called, thought out Danish rosters. But he plays with very little talent. If he was having to be like the third, fourth best player, he's one of those guys where if he's not having to be the number one star on a team, especially as a rifler, then he'd be okay. But he is like the firepower on this roster. And he's just not good enough to be that guy. Add to that Lucky also for me isn't competitive here. In this field of AWPers, he's for me not that competitive. He's just a bit soft. Like if I had to talk about him like I would another Swatch, he's just a bit soft. I don't mind going up against him. I don't feel like he's going to be able to assert his will properly. as an individual. Maybe the system, they'll create some nice shots for him, but he's not a threat. He doesn't scare me. He's not going to hit a crazy shot. He's not going to make a big play just off his own back. So I'm not worried when I face Sashi. I think, sure, Hunden and his, as you put it, info gathering might be able to get them pretty far. Like, he's an outstanding coach, preps his teams very well. But this is sort of like how we used to talk about the old Gamer Legion roster, except somehow just a bit worse. Like, there's even less firepower, and I just don't believe in them being able to do anything. I see them as, depending on their matchups, they might even just go straight home. Who do they start with? Big. Maybe with enough prep, you can squeeze a BO1 out of Big, but I don't see them going through this, and maybe 1-3 is as generous as I can be.
I think they struggle when they can't have Hunden in their ear all the time. I think all the structure and the quick reactions and things, I think that's all just Hunden talking in online officials, and I don't think this team has like any translation to LAN at all. I have basically zero faith in Iceberg. I've never been impressed with like any of the teams he's led in the past, whether that's been Espionage or Ambush, Tricked. You know, all those teams have always looked like very poor in their late round decision making, and I don't think that's really changed with Sashi when I've seen them at these LAN officials. So I think we're probably right that there's a lot of good prep. They've positioned themselves well, but I think who is actually calling, I think, is majorly Hunden, and I don't think there's actually a lot that Iceberg is sort of leaning on here. So,
but Yumi, that would be cheating.
In online officials, it's not. I mean, everybody does it, so it's
that
kind
would
of
be cheating, Yumi. Surely this side would never fall to such lows like this, right?
Hunden's the king of integrity. How dare you? He's the dog. Come on.
I don't know, man. I want to believe that I'd be happy to be wrong that Iceberg is actually the one calling all these things, and it's all just down to like how well they practice. But I think the fall off at these LAN events where like they freeze and they don't do the right things, and like they're just not composed. Yeah, sure, you could blame that on players being young, but I think it's too stark a contrast. I think for me that's why I have my concerns about who is actually the main voice on the team.
Yeah, I don't believe they're making it through. I just had to pick them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no.
No, you didn't. You did not have to pick them. You have so many underdogs to pick from, but you chose them.
True.
You chose them.
He chose the beef.
Yeah. I'm going again, right?
Yes, you are.
Do I have to?
Yes.
I guess probably, unfortunately, it's like, it's a real pick your poison of these last kind of remaining, I guess, 5 teams. But as much as I shit talk them, I think probably you probably have to just go 9 Pandas here. But it's just, I think the only reason I actually want to talk positively about 9 Pandas is, like I said, I feel like a lot of people are coming in towards the side with very rose-tinted glasses about them just because of this kind of win streak that they've had. They're starting off against Astralis too. Like, it's not going to be an easy matchup. They should just get absolutely walked all over there. There's a couple of things that I really like, but I think in particular the one like move or whatever that I think they really did well with that Result pickup is actually incredible. I think Result is destined for a tier 1 team. Like I've seen a lot of people kind of talk about him at times. I think, when people like Chiron were getting shots on VP, I think if anyone was going to get a shot on a team like a VP, Result for me is like that next up. He's been lights out in tier 2 for like a long time, and it's just unfortunately he's been kind of like dragging kind of tough teams. I mean, we kind of saw when Aurora were actually really climbing the ranks. I mean, they got inside of the top 20. It was all off the back of Resort and Deco just putting up these like incredible numbers and actually translating on LAN too. We saw this side get like a 3rd place finish at Mesa Nomadic Masters, where I think they put up some decent performances against some quite weird teams, like teams you can't even prepare for. As some of those kind of Asian teams are, like especially like Chinggis Warriors, for example, they're not exactly like a team you can really prep for. Atox is kind of before Atox are really making that run for Pro League and stuff. So I feel like this is where for me, like Resol is probably one of those players that I do actually really like. He's just been super solid. I don't think there's really anything I can say in a negative note about him. I like him a lot. I think he's very aggressive. He plays a very fun style of Counter-Strike. He's always been someone that I've enjoyed watching. So I think 9 Pandas made a very good pickup, regardless of how kind of like snaky it was. I don't really know what, it was a little bit weird. It was very like a public, like heroic level kind of, it was like tier 2's
weird,
heroic.
backstabby,
Yeah. where like he like forced the move like a month before the RMRs essentially, and then they made a swap with Clax, and without a doubt Aurora got the worst side of the swap there. Like that is, you know, definitely, yeah, they got screwed. Like, there's no two ways about it. But yeah, I mean, it's a great pickup, I think, for them. It's just another one that I think has had his moments too, and some of that I've always enjoyed watching, especially back in the day, was just Shalfie. I think he can be quite exciting. Obviously, when we got to see him back on fours, I always thought he was pretty enjoyable under kind of Jerry ball. But for me, with Nine Pandas, I just worry a little bit about them. I actually don't think they have the depth, even though I know they got snubbed not making it for the last major, and it would be kind of a cool sort of redemption story, sort of in a way like Sododo, when he like no scoped Jame and legged him, and then
they don't have seized anymore. We're not attached
exactly
the same way,
exactly. And when they were making it, like I was always, in the same way I said a bait. I think it was like Scriv used to say this, like seized ball, right? It was like the same thing. It was just funny to see if seized can make it to the major again. But now that he's not here, I don't really have any kind of affiliation or care about this side all that much. I think a lot of people are overrating them a little bit too much coming into his RMR because, again, of that win streak, and they're not actually looking at the teams they're beating or how they're beating them, and actually the times that they're struggling on certain maps too against pretty shit teams. So I think they need to be a little bit concerned about that. For me, Nine Panthers, I think maybe the best of the bunch, but yeah, I still really worry about them. I think they got a lot of holes in their kind of game plan. I think our disbalance goes completely missing a lot for me, and that really worries me. I really actually quite like Diddledez, but again, he can have his up and down moments too. And Glowing, he's kind of picked his moments. We've seen kind of even the previous RMR where, I don't know, where we kind of saw him really like, everyone was kind of joking about it. Like, what was like 30-year-old talent was sort of what everyone was sort of saying, for Glowing, which is sick. Can he do that again? I don't know, but we'll have to see. The thing is just like, can we get a translation of this online form onto us RMR against much better teams? I don't know if they have the depth for that.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it earlier that I just don't think they look that good. Even though I think they've got they've got very cool, interesting pieces. Like, yeah. I think, like you said, Resol can win games, Shalfie can win games. I think Glowing himself can like win games from his like he anchors, but like pseudo anchors, where he's like he doesn't like just rotate when bomb is seen. He will just leave sometimes, and that sometimes gets them in trouble. I think the weirdest part is that I would have thought this team would all click and that Ida's balance would have space to be good on the AWP, but God, this guy fell off like very hard, which is I guess maybe a major pain point for me. Aside from like the weird mid rounding and stuff like that, I think this team has a lot of firepower, but it's weirdly missing like in one of the most impactful roles that you have on a team.
This is a roster who, in terms of that mid-rounding, in terms of the AWP not really ever finding form or space or anything, really, it just feels like a team that has too many cooks. I feel that's the issue. Because Resol, whilst he is, like on CT side, you see he's an anchor officially, and you see the spots he plays, but he does like to get involved. And then on T side, he's hyper-aggressive. And then you have Glowing, who kind of floats, it's sort of an ambiguity around his role in my mind a lot of the time, where I'm like, yeah, he kind of does what he wants as well. He has his own ideas. Shalfie has to get involved. He likes to play make. He can frag, kind of calls his own number. At the end of the day, since Result joined, Idisbalance taken even more of a backseat than he was before when this team was succeeding with an aggressive Diddledez. And Diddledez has also taken a more passive role, but he's so talented it doesn't matter. And a rifler being passive and sitting and letting people come to him, then he massacres them, is very different to an AWPer who has to be incredibly selective about when he takes his shots. Now, part of that might also be Idisbalance simply accepting that he's been on the decline and cannot go and challenge teams. But I do think there's a part of it that is just he doesn't have the space and the opportunity on this roster to make those sorts of plays. I actually kind of dig this roster because of the way Diddledez has adapted his game to the Result edition. I thought they'd clash massively. I thought it'd be a problem, and it was initially for him in the first sort of like month or so of officials they played with Result. It was kind of like they took it in turns almost to be the true star rifler on the T side, and then on CT side the roles all looked a bit ugly. So I was like, I don't like it. But then that, not just that win streak, but the way they adapted and the way they started playing. I mean, they started playing a far more comfortable brand, at least for those riflers. I agree, I still don't quite get the calling. I don't quite get the system. but at least it's garnered wins and it's got them comfortable. Each of the individual riflers looks like they're at least comfortable making the plays and taking the risks they want to, which has led to them winning a lot of games and a lot of rounds. And yeah, sure, not the highest level of opposition, I'll admit it. But also, as we said before, a lot of the teams who are at the RMR sort of level have kind of fallen off in their officials recently. So Na'Vi Junior, one of the best teams you can play against right now. They beat them 2-0 quite comfortably. So that's a nice sign at least. Like, there's something there in their most recent officials. And I do think they are more threatening than their ranking deserves. Realistically. I've got to close this out with a favorite for myself, or... Yeah, it is me again.
Yeah, I think that's you. Yeah,
it's back to me. I'm so weird being in the 2 slot with you at the like, this is just completely throwing me for a loop. I'm so used to the guest going number 1.
But wait, who did you pick on your second favorite? Who'd you pick as your second underdog?
I've got Bait and TSM.
Bait and TSM, yeah, okay, I'll just make it.
Yeah, I've taken some left field picks, and I might keep going.
I've not been writing them down, so I had to remind myself.
Yeah, don't worry, I have the graphics on screen, so I'm well aware. Oh, wow. Don't tell me I'm about to pick 3D Max. I'm taking 3D Max. And I kind of hate it, but also love it. The French grinders, they've been around forever. Most of these guys playing together. And let's be honest, I've had a lot of negative things to say about a lot of players who've come through this sort of French second team. Like, that's how we kind of think of them. There's Vitality, who all the French fans are still with. Obviously, they're not that French anymore.
Yeah.
It's just the coach, the IGL, and the best player in the world. It's not that French. Just the 3 most important people in modern CS. Who cares about those rifle spots? This is the second team of France. And they're a very threatening squad, despite who they have in the lineup. A lot of the time you look at the names, and if you're not very invested, you think, who are these bums? Like, let's be real. We all know Lucky because of his brief stints in the higher echelons. Maka, Joko, Exorcist, Gravity. You have to be watching Tier 2 CS to get these names and get why they actually do pose a little bit of a threat. They have a they're super on the same page. That's the thing. The style may not always be theoretically correct, and they do feel a bit like a weird team with this AWP, IGL, like, star fragger, because I do believe Maka is still calling. Like, that is still my picture of them in my head. I'm pretty sure that's still correct.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah,
they haven't made any weird switch. So they are a strange team to reckon with, just a difficult beast to get your harpoon into. Like, you're just not sure what you're facing up. And for me, the roster has slowly gotten better as they've made changes. Like, Gravity was a player who I thought they took a bit of a risk bringing in, but at least it was like sort of an addition by subtraction at minimum. Like, cutting Haji, who just wasn't working in better star roles, who needed to be in off support roles. That just doesn't really fit him. He's got a bit too much, I think, of an ego to really play those hard entry or super hard anchor sort of roles. So they brought in a guy who's just definitely going to be that extreme of a role player, and it's unlocked, I think, a higher level out of players like Exercise. Out of Joko, a little bit more consistency. Not a lot. He still is the same old Joko that French fans love to say zut alors about. Like, he can be all over the shop, but he can win a game against even a G2 at this event. And I'm not taking the piss. That's Joko's ceiling. Will he reach it? Let's find out. Let's roll the dice. I'm taking a big risk on this pick, but I don't like Virtus Pro. I don't like Big. I think 3D Max have a puncher's chance and enough of a chaotic yet uniform style to really, like, make teams uncomfortable, especially in the BO1s. And the BO3s, hey, let's hope the draw goes their way, and my favorite makes it through.
I'm not going to spend too much time on this team because I think they're okay, but I just don't think they've got, like, loads of, like, upper echelon punching up. Like, these are the most gatekeeper tier 2 team in the circuit, where if you want to make the rung up to tier 1, you have to beat a 3D Max. Like, that's the level I put them at. They hold that crown more so than Big Clan for me. Even though people will always say Big are the gatekeepers, that they maybe even deserve to be in tier 2, quite comfortably so. I mean, yeah, 3D Max they're sporadic. They're fun at times, but then they can, depending on which team they're playing, they kind of play to the pace of their opponent. I think is the only thing that I notice about them, where I think sometimes you benefit from, I guess, pushing the other team off tempo. 3D Max don't really do that for me, but they grind out wins. Like, these guys play a lot of Counter-Strike. I can't hate it. I think lots of different players can have their impact, and they're they're the old descriptor of like a national team where it's like very much a win by committee, and if one piece is failing, then the rest of it is too. So
yeah, I mean, I'll just touch on one thing, just to kind of like, I don't mean to like correct you on your own show. Hadji left, he didn't get replaced. It was his choice.
Yeah, I'm talking a replacement. I don't pretend to know Gravity, the GM decisions, but
it was a little bit of a left field because he came from Gen 1, which is like KRL, the streamers team essentially. But I will say Gravity is actually a really decent pickup. The issue that I have with 3D Max is how can you be like a French team and not even have the top 3 French players in your team, right? That's the worry I have with them, right? They just don't have the top 3 players, right?
And how are you going to get them, though?
Yeah, how are you going to go buy Apex, Saiwu, and who, Netu? Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah, he was a free agent, and they didn't even get him.
I mean, a lot of people wanted him. I'm telling you this. A lot of people tried to get him. Like, I know, it wasn't an easy pickup.
The thing for me is that I really feel like for 3D Max, they're just a side who are... They're like, I can kind of mic touch on this. They've just got very clear limitations. I just don't think like they've had so many chances to step up in towards tier 1, and like I just want to unify themselves as a side who are at least like punching up in a lot of tournaments, and we've seen them. I mean, fair play, make these sort of these waves in a way. Thunderpick top 4. You can maybe make arguments that like the caliber of opponents there is like more tier 1.5. It's not as much, but we've seen them go to the, quite a few of these like pro leagues, for example, coming through or Challenger League. And I just don't really think they ever do anything. They're always like hovering around like 50th to 20th or something like that. And it's just one of those for me where I just feel like in this sort of a tournament, I don't see them really as some sort of threat or favorite. I feel like they're maybe going to, beat teams like an NIP or like a Paravision or a TSM, whatever, because like, we touched on, they're like a gatekeeper to the tier 1, but they themselves have never been able to kind of supersede their own sort of gate in a way. They're not being able to walk through their own gate that they're keeping and get in towards tier 1 and actually certify themselves as a scary side. I think they had a time like tail end 2023 coming in towards this year as well, maybe a kind of post Hadji change, and we're saying like, all right, we're going to like now actually really make a move. We've got this youngster coming in, fresh ideas, and we're going to try and, fix all of the issues we had. I think also it definitely seemed like there was like some sort of beef in the team when Hadji was leaving. He's like maybe a bit of a cocky player and it kind of affected the vibes or whatever. And Gravity's this youngster who I got to interview him at Pro League, and he was just saying like, I'm playing with legends from my scene. Like this is like, I'm really happy to be here. I'll do whatever I can to make it work. So he's obviously a very humble kind of young guy. And I think that's probably what they needed. But I just unfortunately just don't think they have it in them to be able to step up. Like, I just don't think they have that extra gear needed to take down a side, even who are on a bad day, like a VP. We kind of not touched on that much. I just don't know if 3D Max have it in them. They just feel like a side who have these such clear limitations to their game.
Yeah, I'm just gonna touch in back. Just one final thing is, yeah, I weirdly when I first saw this team get picked up by 3D Max, I posed the question: would they lose the intensity, the fire, the like growth? And I don't think they've grown since they were looking for org into the 3D Max transition. I think they've gone comfortable with the idea of, hey, we're getting salaries, we're maintaining a decent ranking, we're still playing in a lot of these events, and that may be as far as this team ever really develops. Because I wanted to see them continue that progress, but when players are hungriest, they seem to work the hardest, and I don't know that this team is working as hard. Yeah.
Yeah, and also they might be looking for org again soon. We saw all this kind of rumors that like 3D Max aren't paying them or whatever, and they might be leaving. So who knows?
They're pretty much under this banner voluntarily at this point, from what I gather.
There we go.
They're pretty much just choosing to still be like 3D Max, but they are on the side allowed to get an org to sign them. If an org comes in and makes an offer, they are basically gone.
First off, that's a terrible decision for you as a player, because
free publicity to an org who's not paying you.
Yeah, and also, will they all know that you're free agents? I mean, some will, but others won't. So I don't know.
It might be a contract that expires that's definitely not getting re-upped. It might be one of those situations, so they've just chosen to leave it out and just make it public. So as far as I know, it's pretty public. Like, it's not a secret hidden detail of the French scene that they are available for signing. It's just unfortunate. But I look at this and I listen to this conversation we've just had. So they're gatekeepers, and I've watched them play LANs and beat a lot of teams who are here and in other RMRs considered amongst the top dogs. Am I not still picking a favorite who's definitely going to smash everyone below them and probably beat big and probably be Virtus Pro in my eyes. Like, I see them entirely as a favorite in that sense.
To be honest, everybody in the tops, like, so I have, just when I've blind picked, I was like G2 Spirit, Eternal Fire Heroic, Astralis, 3D Max / Big, and then Bait. You know, that's like, those are the 7 that I think are going to make it. And to be honest, I think it will probably end up as like Big 3D Max or even Bait 3D Max or something in like the 7th, 8th decider. And I couldn't, you know, I don't really care who wins that, I guess. But that's kind of like my power ranking coming into this. I did think like 3D Max probably should get past most of these teams, given they're probably they are stable, maybe not deserving of like a favorite spot, but they are stable enough, I think.
Oh,
I genuinely believe Big are like way better than 3D Max. Like I'm like hard on that point. I don't know if I get a chance to talk about another team.
We will probably be talking about Big briefly at the end, but
there we go.
Yeah,
but if we're talking about that, like better than like 3D Max better than Big, that's like a hard disagree for me. I really don't believe. I'm like full against that. I generally don't think 3D Max are.
I don't know. I think Searshead's sometimes good and oftentimes shit. So
far too often
recently good, I think.
Recently better.
Yeah, recently has been for some reason like kind of wild. I mean, I don't know where it's come from. He's got like just like a 1.1 like last like 3 months. So that's all you need from him. So.
Well, I just remember him having like.
We'll get into Big then, because that's going to be some controversial takes in that sense. Because I don't think they need just a 1.1 from Searson to make a dent here. But we've got one last pick. Let's get the picks out of the way. Another underdog Yuumi, and one you've got to sell to yourself before you can even try to sell to us, I think. Good luck. Just pick NIP, get it over with.
Do I have more faith in Aurora than NIP? Yeah, fuck it. Yeah, we're picking Aurora.
Love it.
This is... So I had my worries about Aurora this year because they qualified to actually quite a few lands at the end of last season or like middle of last season, and I actually think they burned themselves out. Just traveling event to event and playing poorly at all of them, and I think they probably spiraled very quickly. Like, oh, we're making the same mistakes. They're just checking out of games. I think this is a team that can just tilt out of the server very quickly. You know, part of that maybe comes from like Deco and unsure about his commitments, and you know the calling has changed hands from like Lackey to Norway, and you know they're players with ideas. I know Kenzie is quite a vocal player as well. So sometimes the direction looks awful. Like when Aurora are bad, they are very bad. But when this team has even the slightest bit of composure, and that's where I usually look at Lackey. That's where I would look at the coaching staff. I would expect them to basically beat like everyone bar the top 4 ranked teams at this tournament. I think they can beat a Virtus Pro. I think they would be able to beat an Astralis, but it does happen very sporadically that they can do it. Like I actually thought the Clax for Result signing was crazy, mainly because I was like, there's no way you make that agreement. But to be honest, Clax to me has revealed himself to not be as poor as I thought he would be. I think he's even improved while he's been with Aurora, even though the team is looking fucking shit around him sometimes. And you know, Kenzie, Norway, Deco, all these guys can take over games at certain moments. Like when these guys are very on it, I don't think it's just about Deco and whether he's locked in. Like the riflers can also just have very dominant series. So we're down on this team, maybe, but I think it can be very easy to sort of overshadow the amount of talent that they actually have and the amount of times that they can just cause upsets. So I think that's where Aurora, for me, are more convincing than an NIP that have to now field Yocab again and, you know, are probably missing their most important player. So.
No, I want to hear your thoughts on this. I do want to hear your Aurora takes, because
Yeah. So if you'd asked me before the change, I would have Aurora as like a lock-in top 7 team. When Rest was on this side, I loved them. But I touched on this, I think it was Challenger Yon shipping, I think it was. And I think I was on the desk for that. And I just got off the back of working or kind of being with those guys. I'm just checking out if it was Yon shipping. It was Challenger Yon shipping, yeah. And I've been out with them in Mongolia. I got a chance to kind of hang out with the Aurora guys and see what they were like. And, first of all, lovely guys. They're pretty funny to hang out with. Like, it's all kind of all you'd really want. In particular, Kenzie, pretty funny dude. Deco's exactly what you'd expect Deco to be like in real life.
Okay.
Just quite hilarious to see him around the studio and stuff. But the thing is with Aurora is the point you touched on. I said this on the Yonsping test. I said I think these guys are burning out. I mean, at the point at which they played Yonsping, they had, I think, the second most officials on HLTV of any team in the world at that point. The only team being more was Zero Tenacity, who, they've still kept it up. Aurora absolutely killed themselves, and you could see it.
And they were doing it while traveling to LAN events.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
They were doing online officials and that as well.
They were playing like officials while at LAN.
Yeah.
And they played ESL Challenge in Melbourne as well. I mean, that Melbourne flight is no joke. Then did like it's like Bedboom Dacha, followed by like CCT that was like straight after online, then into Mongolia, then into Jönköping, while still trying to like qualify for all these other ESL events at the same time, like your Pro League. So there are a side for me who I just think are playing too much Counter-Strike, which I'm normally the other way. I normally think like, if you're a tier 2 side, this is what you've got to do to make it up. You've got to grind. You've got to play a lot of officials, and that's how you're going to get your chances. But I think they overdid it. They definitely burnt out. But if Resort was in this side, I would easily say that they're going in towards this, and I would say like they are like top of the underdogs. I love this side, but I think since that change has come through, I just really feel like I've lost all hope for this side. I think also the mental seems to have completely boomed. It doesn't help when you got Deco talking about retiring, basically saying like, I can't wait for this major cycle to end, and then I'm going to go full-time streaming. Like, that doesn't help, right? They definitely can't be good vibes. They're like losing a lot of games. The Counter-Strike they've been playing recently just looks so uninspiring. They just don't seem to care. I know they got a good win against Nine Pandas, literally earlier today, and that kind of like cool little derby that we had, obviously since the whole backstabbing thing, and they definitely got the bad end of the deal, because essentially Result just said like, I will just not play if you don't like send me to Nine Pandas. I'm just going to refuse to play. So they kind of got forced into it, but I think when they play against good teams, I think they struggle. We saw them at Thunder Pick when they kind of went out like sort of dead last, but M80 and Big are pretty good teams, fair enough, but I still think at least for probably M80 in particular, they should be competing with, just because M80's run of form recently has looked a little shaky online. There's maybe a chance where Aurora could be like, okay, online Counter-Strike, this is our domain, but it didn't happen. I think that's the big worry for me. I just feel for the most part, they're a side who are not showing enough as a side. And also to mention, on top of that, you've got a coach who has like just no experience, like no playing experience, no prior coaching experience. He is a brand new entity brain in this side. And one of those things actually where, and I got to see this firsthand in Mongolia, when he's not, I think, I don't know how much he talks to them in online officials, but even on LAN at times, when he can't get his moment to speak, that team completely falls apart. And I got to saw it in Mongolia because in their lower bracket finals games, the third place to who's going to the finals, them against Bleed. This is something that like a lot of people didn't really know that happened, but essentially they went one map up. Things were going really good in that game against Bleed. Then, as the map's ending, there's a 10-minute break normally, 10-15 minutes, players get time to go have a smoke or whatever. Rather than walking down the stairs, he jumped off the stage and he broke his leg. So he then had to go to hospital. Yeah, Brain, at the event, right there. I saw it from the caster's nest. I was casting the game. He breaks his ankle, I think it was actually, or like fractured it or something. Anyway, like, because he jumped off like the, 3-4 foot stage or whatever, and it was like there was all these cables underneath the carpet, and he definitely just landed awkwardly on it. Anyway, he then has to go to hospital, so they have to play map 2 and 3 without him. 0 attack pauses, they completely fall apart. And I think that's one of those things that even though he's an inexperienced coach, and even though he does like, I don't know how much he actually really brings to the side, I don't really know if he can help them as a side who always look mentally kind of boomed as well when they are losing. But it's one of those where I do worry that in dark situations for Aurora, especially the kind of rot they've been in recently, I don't know if he has the kind of experience as a coach to be able to bring them out and say, right, this is what we're going to do. This is our chance. I mean, they're starting off this one with Eternal Fire too. For me, I feel like, I think you guys are sort of saying the other way, but I think the only redeeming factor at the moment on Aurora is actually that of Deco. I really don't rate that many of the other players at the moment. There was definitely arguments when they were in these really high bits where Lackey looked super solid. I think his calling felt okay, even though it was a role that he hadn't done for a while. I think Kenzie was still putting up decent numbers. Norvi as well, when he was doing a bit of, Lackey, and then Norvi took over the calling from Lackey, and it seemed to be a kind of seamless transition or whatever. I think that's sort of fallen apart. I think this side just seems super tilted all the time, and it shows in this style of Counter-Strike.
Yeah, the excitement feels like it's died.
Yeah.
For me. When we're talking about Kenzie Norway, the Aurora side that's dangerous, right? That duo is a large part of the reason. Even as far as like when Result's on the team, they're still Kenzie and Norway. Like you still feel like they're a big, like dynamic duo, get a lot of the fragging work done. But it does feel like coming into this event, it is very deco dependent, and I don't like that idea. Now the brain side of things, I hadn't even given two thoughts to their coaching situation. That story's fucking hilarious. I mean, I looked up. He's been one of those tier 2 CIS like sort of players for years and years. It's just that, you know, his prime seems to have been around the time when nobody watched a damn second of like tier 2.5, tier 3 CS. It was so far down in the doldrums. So
his only team on HLTV, I don't know if you saw it, it's called Team Swag YOLO.
Yeah, so that was his sort of mixed team that make it deep in like a cash cup. But like he's been listed like
a lot in Mongolia.
Out of respect, you know.
Yeah, Team Swag YOLO.
But he's played like on Moscow Fives, like sort of 2015 rosters, like around that sort of era. And they're not big teams by any means, but he's played at least at a fairly high level. And these guys might have come up playing under him or playing with him in pugs, at least in that scene. What matters to me mostly is just, I love a great rifle core, and it feels like this one has just fallen to bits. It used to make so much sense to me as well. With Norway, with Kenzie, with Lackey as a supportive, more experienced player, trying to basically take a slight step down, away from Entropic where he was, to refine himself and like bring a team up. Kind of felt like it was working. And now it's just, shattered to pieces. That does make this team very scary though. Because your wrists at this age haven't magically fallen off. Like, they're not that old. They haven't got that many reps. This is not going to be a problem of they can never be that good again. These guys have a lot of talent lying in dormant. So I think they're going to be a bit of a threat if they magically show up and activate it. The problem is I only have reality what I've seen to go off of, so I could never pick them. I could never make the pick. I would have honestly I would have tried to make a case for an IP. Let's just say it that way. I'd have had an easier time convincing myself to pick an IP. But for me, Aurora are... maybe a sleeping giant, like just with a little bit of that hidden away CIS talent we haven't seen in a while. And maybe it is the burnout. Maybe they're now taking like a few days off, you know, crack one out, finally decompress, and they'll come out ready to frag. But man, it's been rough watching them these last few.
They're just like a weird paper tiger that, you know, they like unfolded, and they need to take some origami lessons real quick.
Yeah, Brain, he needs some origami. He's the one who needs to do it, right? He's the one who needs to put all the pieces where they need to go, present a finished product. That's what we want to see.
I mean, play with legends like Dav Cost and Tony Black back in the day, you know?
Those are real legends. Only the real ones know those names.
The OGs.
Those are some OGs, real gangsters.
And Albaze was in there too, but we don't talk about him.
Yeah, these guys have got unk status to the max. Like,
True.
Everyone knows them. But let's get on to the forgotten teams, because there's two rather big orgs at this one that we haven't discussed, so I feel like we have to touch on them. And we're going to start with the one that has been most kind of stabbed as we've walked past them. You know, Cash, just stick another knife in, stick another knife in. That's NIP. Like, we haven't said a damn thing nice about them so far. And I feel like maybe there's still some saving grace to them. There's still some stuff we could say positively. So I'm going to give you guys a chance. What is your kind of reluctant love letter to what's left on NIP?
Sorry, love letter.
Yeah.
Does it have to be positive?
I want you to try.
The only thing I'll give them is I still think Wrinkle's a good player. That is all I'll give them. I like Wrinkle. I think he's talented. I think he made a terrible decision going to NIP. It was good at the time, but in hindsight, it's obviously not worked out. But that's the only thing I'll give them. For me, I even think the argument about Rez are not becoming redeeming anymore. I think this is a dead team. They definitely come. I can't believe they'd even be coming in towards the tournament with any sort of expectation. So Wrinkle's the only thing I'll give them. I like him. When he's on his game, I think he's pretty fun to watch. I think he'd be quite an aggressive and flashy AWPer. And, you know, we've kind of seen for a while he's been one of those players who's sort of been the only one doing stuff for NIP. And when they've picked up wins, that's the one thing I'll give them. That's basically about it.
Yeah, I know we've talked a lot about Isaac in the past, but
really very positively.
Yeah, I mean, from the perspective of, you know, people always saying like, oh, he's got great mechanics, he's makes good choices. I don't know that I've seen that on NIP at all. And that does always beg the question when you have teams or players transition from one team or one system to another, like how good can they adapt, and how much of that is actually their own autonomy actually speaking to those decisions. Is it the system that's doing it? Is it the coaching? Is it like an in-game leader that's doing it? So far, I'm just not happy with what I've seen from NIP, and I think the Mistim transition was supposed to be like, oh hey, look, we got an in-game leader that he shoots pretty well. It's this will all work, and it's looked worse than it ever has, I think. But also they are not playing with their 5, and they haven't since Mistim has been there, so it's not entirely his fault, I suppose. But also, like, I don't know what's happening with that IP, man. They actually just struggle to always have a 5-man roster. There's always something wrong with them. I think Rez is fine. He's not like a superstar. He's not like a crazy star player, but he has good output. He still does his job, I think, quite well. And we love to dunk on Rez for being like inconsistent, but he's actually been the most stable piece of NIP considering how long he's fucking been there. So, Rez, Wrinkle, those are my shining lights. Everything else, I could burn it if I don't need them in the roster. Maxter's been okay as well, but he's not here.
I'll debate that. I
was about to go there as well.
Shit.
Sure.
I don't think he's shit. I just think
I do. I don't think he's that good. I really think he's super overrated in terms of Swedish talent. I think he's way better Swedish talents.
No, that might be. There's a few who I think are better.
I'm taking half a Nilo over a full Maxter like any day of the week. I still think Nilo's talent is incredible. I just think Metasport as a team are just like dead in the water. But like, I think there's quite a few Swedish people that I'd rather take over him personally. I don't know. I felt like it was maybe a rush thing to kind of put Maxter in towards his team, and I just don't actually think he's lived up to it like at all. If you want my really kind of like I don't even know what the word is, like really mean take here.
Yeah, go for
it. I know he's from my understanding he's ill, and I hope he gets better and whatever it is. But it's been a while. Initially, when I saw that, NIP have had their fair share of like dodgy moments, Astralis-esque moments, we'll call them. I initially actually thought they were just using that as an excuse to drop him. That's what I thought it was at the now it seems like they've kind of spoken about it. I think it existed that video talking about how he's ill, and because of that they're gonna have to use Yokab. So I'll pull back that statement. But genuinely at the start, I actually thought they were just using it as an excuse to like drop Maxter like nicely and then bring Yokab in for a little bit, who I don't even think is that big of an upgrade. But I actually think there's other talents that I'd rather take, like especially when you've got people like like again, I don't know, you'd have to kind of shuffle some roles around a little bit because of the calling, but you got Hampus on Orgla's side. I think Bob XD is actually a pretty solid player as well too. I don't know. For me, it's just one of those where I'm not being a Maxter fan, so I don't really I definitely thought he was being dropped.
Rough, considering my list of players I'd rather have in Sweden right now. It's specifically Sweden. They're an international team, so I don't really have to have this limitation. Mm-hmm. It extends as far as Nilo, and that's about it. That I definitely want on the roster.
If you haven't seen him, I'm assuming you have because you're a man very in touch of it. But if you haven't, that Poi on Eyeballers is actually like he's
seen him play.
Potentially could be generational. He's young, but like he could be like a next Swede coming up.
He's also playing in like tier 3 Counter-Strike.
Exactly.
And he's not stomping people, and that's been my problem.
It's true.
He does play in the gutter of all tier 2 CS of Eyeballers, which knows how to take talent and fun and joy and just squeeze it out of their lives and then just die. Because that's been Eyeballers. It's just been horrible to watch.
Yeah.
I feel like we're getting sidetracked.
Yeah.
Just bickering about Swedish talent.
Counter-Strike. Oh my god, it's in a state.
It's kind of in a gross state, but they have some talented riflers. That's not the point here. I do think Maxter's actually half decent. I just don't think they've ever found a cohesive system that makes real sense. And Maxter has at times played very well on NIP. It's just as the team's gotten younger and less structured and more chaotic, and things have made less sense. And like even the Alex transition didn't go that well. Now it's just the academy guy calling, and I feel like NIP have had some better Swedish IGLs come through their academy, essentially now when you look back at it, and let them go. I think Linus might be one of the better ones Sweden could have ever offered, but they didn't make the most of that. No, but I'm looking at the roster and I think the eye test on Wrinkle is so powerful. Like when you watch, especially the maps where it works, obviously, where the teams not in his way, and his little ridiculously aggressive moves work. The eye test is bonkers. Like, I still remember to this day my favorite demo of the year. It'll go down if I do an end of the year show. I'm gonna have demo of the year. It's NIP versus FaZe on Ancient Wrinkle POV. What a ridiculous masterpiece that is of aggressive AWPing. Like, he's taking so many risks that even a rifler sometimes wouldn't attempt, and he's landing the shots to back it up. It was outstanding. The problem is we've not seen that anywhere near enough. As in, he's tried a lot of stuff. It has rarely worked. And the team around him doesn't really seem capable of coming up with a contingency plan, finding another player to find a big frag. It's supposed to be Rez. It's lesser so, but it's still kind of meant to be Maxter. Now it's going to have to be Yokab, who lost a fine player on the academy. I don't think anywhere near ready to just come in and replace a player who's supposed to be fragging out in tier 1. Like, he's just not that guy. And like, whilst Isaac, some people, I think this is actually a Kassad take, that Isaac's like the best support no one like really follows. And I was like, as someone who does, I'm not really with you, but okay. Like, Wrinkle's still not supposed to be the game winner. Even if he is the great support, he's not the match winner. I don't really get where the big plays are going to come from if they're not from Wrinkle. And we've seen time and time again, in moments he has them. In others, he's just doing wild stuff that doesn't work out. So no, NIP, if they can figure out the rest of the nonsense, give Wrinkle some stability, and he develops into the, honestly, prodigal AWPer that the top-end eye test promises, they've got something there. For now, it's the same ugly NIP we've seen for like 5 years. Who the hell is on this team? Why are they on this team? How is this meant to work? I hate it. Burn it. Stop. That's kind of the way everyone reacts to NIP still. And I get the dissatisfaction. But I do think they are... That Wrinkle ceiling is high enough for them to be just a nuisance, I think, at this event. You know, upset someone in a BO1. That opening BO1 against G2. G2 give them the wrong map. Wrinkle feels himself waking up. He has his Weetabix, as we all say. He might actually take someone down just by himself. Not 3, but 1.
Yeah, like, you know, get like... I think there's a world they can get like a really... Like, for them, at the very least, like a really good upset, like a win over like Paravision, you know what I mean? Like, really solid for them. But like anything else, I'm not with it.
I love the disrespect. A really solid upset for them, beating Paravision.
Yeah.
that's outrageous, but I do appreciate it. That's a bar right there. Like, that's a diss track by itself. Rough, very rough. And the other one is another letter team, Big. Berlin International Gaming, although apparently they're trying to distance themselves from the Berlin side of it. Not sure why. Like, it just seems like it's becoming less and less prevalent in the branding. I don't know. I love Big. I love the brand. I love the logo. I've got one of my best t-shirts that really fits me nicely. It's got a Big logo on it. I'm a big fan. But yeah, Berlin International Gaming, the Big Bears. I didn't pick them. Y'all didn't pick them. I was told y'all had picked them over 3 Max, some of you, so I want to hear it's Ne0Kai. Give me the big propaganda speech, because I'm just going to throw this out here. The Searson belief, I watched him at his last LAN, beyond mid. So I need you to hard sell me this.
Okay, well, my thing is nothing to do with Searson. I still don't really rate this guy, really, at all. I think he has like spotty moments and maps and series where he pops off. The reason why I actually do like this team, I think Rigon, for me, feels like a direct upgrade of a Process. I just don't think Process was ready for tier 1. You know, nothing against him. We've kind of seen it with a variety of people that have gone in towards tier 1 a little bit too early, you know, especially like, you know, some of these Danish players like Oltex and Mister and whatever, or even like the MPLs came in a little bit early, obviously was just not given the right space to grow. And I just don't, you know, he's playing all these like horrible anchor roles and wasn't able to really kind of perform on them. I actually think Rigon's come in towards the side and done really, really well. But for me, the redeeming factors of this side are 2 guys in particular. First one being JDC. I think he's actually looked really good for me. I think JDC was, again, another one of those like really unsung heroes from like the Mals and XT of the WePlay academies, where like, you know, the rest of them went on to do really good things, and he just sort of ended up dwelling and kind of being in these sort of middling teams for a while. I think he's coming towards the side and actually just looked really confident. He's playing a fun style of Counter-Strike. I think in the kind of year or just shy of a year that he's been with Big, I think, you know, he's been brought in to bring a bit of impact and help out this rifling core, and I think he's done a very good job of that. So I've actually liked him in this side. I think he's very fun to watch. But I think for me, the main reason why you watch Big is Crimbo. I think Crimbo has the potential to be a top level rifler, and he has all the necessities in terms of his game style. I mean, I even got a chance to talk to Tabson a bit about this and saying, like, so for me at one point, I thought Crimbo was the best clutch player in the world in terms of like 1vx's. Crimbo was incredible. And actually, it wasn't even just I thought that. The stats actually backed it. He actually had like the best 1v2 and 1v3 rating at like lands in top events or whatever of like any player in the world. So he was putting up like these ridiculous clutches and quite consistently too. And I spoke to Thompson about it, and he was saying like we're all trying to learn from Crimbo because like the way he thinks about the game, even despite being so young, is like so far ahead of like a lot of other players, and he's so calm in situations where even experienced players aren't because of the kind of pressure on their shoulders, and it just doesn't seem to phase him. I think that is a real sick talent to have at such a young age. I think realistically, probably, unfortunately, I think the only thing holding him back, and it's kind of peak to say, is I really hope that Crimbo doesn't follow the same path as Tabson. Tabson is the biggest what if, or one of the biggest what ifs in terms of players. If he had gone international, if he had gone and played on one of those big teams back in the day, he could have ended up being seen as one of the best riflers, you know, of that Go generation, right? One of the real kind of goats, so you could say, because he had the ability to do so, but he was arguably a little bit too loyal and stayed with a very mid-big side for too long. I think, you know, as peak as it is to say, I think the best thing Crimbo can do is probably, you know, lead a side and go to a big international team. I think he can do it as well. I think he has the ability to play on a top team. But I think while he's on big, I think he does enough for me. I like JDC a lot. I like Crimbo. I think Tabson, he's no longer required to put up these insane numbers as he once was in this side, but he still doesn't do too bad, even still kind of being that caller for me. I think Kakafusen's coming as a coach, seems to be doing all right and changing up the way this side is playing. With Godby, it felt like they were just in this rinse and repeat cycle of kind of just dwindling around and not really doing a hell of a lot. So as much as Searson has a lot of question marks around him, he's not for me the main factor I look into as his team. I still want to see the Searson that we've kind of seen of late, where he's actually playing quite well. Like, if we get Searson at like a 1.1, this side has enough to me to actually, at least, maybe not, I don't think they're a lock-in by any means, but I think they've got a better chance than 3D Max for damn sure. And I think they've got a better chance than teams like NIPs and your Auroras and your Sashis, your 9Pandas, etc. A lot of teams have been kind of throwing out like, I think 9Pandas will make it, but not be talking about big. I actually think Big have a much better chance than them. I think they have the individuals to do so regardless. And also, another thing to mention is that Searson, when he comes against like lesser opponents, he just flex a little bit. You know, it doesn't happen against the big players. We're not going to see him do it against like a Monacy, but I've seen him play against like some of these like tier 2 guys and just go back to being like a beast that we see for like one series, and then he'll go and play like,
and then he falls off again.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
he'll go back and play like Woxic, you know, until 5 and shit the bed again. But all that matters is he going to beat the teams below him? Yes, that's my argument. I think they are, you know, maybe the only player you can argue that is Deco. I think Deco, again, skill ceiling wise, actually is probably better than Searson still, in my opinion. But most other players below them, I think he can go head to head potentially with Jambo. Depends a lot around them. But I think with Wrinkle, he's got so much other externalities going on at NIP team. I think they can beat them. TSM, Paravision, 9Pandas, Sashi, all of which I think Searson can do better than. And 3D Max too as well. That's my argument.
They lost to alternate attacks and then almost lost to them again recently.
It's true. And alternate attacks don't even have an org at the moment.
Yeah.
So
I don't know that I'm really with the Searson, you know, you beat up the little guy, because he's had some stinkers against teams that they really should beat.
Yeah.
I do agree though. I think Crimbo and JDC have always been the highlight of this team, even like before the Rigon pickup, before the Searson acquisition. Like, those guys have, I mean, they're just so good. JDC is in most of the star roles, and I think it's really confusing to me is that on CT, and I think even on some of their T side roles, JDC is in like the entry, like opener fight positions more so than JDC or than Rigon is, which doesn't make any sense to me. Like, where is the Rigon from Bad News Eagles? Wait, he's slicked back his hair, he put on some glasses, he's like, I'm a smarter Counter-Strike player now, I'm not going to do that
the
anymore.
Glasses, man, adds IQ.
I just don't get it. Like, what I would have thought that was the whole reason for the change in the first place, is that they did lack an assertive player. They had JDC, they had Crimbo as like good mid stage players, mid to late round stage players. You needed someone that was good at openers, and that was where Rigon was supposed to find that consistency, and instead we're just like, we're putting him in as like a role player, and it doesn't make any sense to me. And that that does really like taint my perspective on Big, because I always thought of them as like a team that would make use of the weapons in the most efficient way possible, and this doesn't feel like an efficient use of resources at all. And I do see the highlights, or like the shining light in Kakafu coming in. I think that coaching change actually does benefit Big a lot, because I almost felt like God B and Tabson would both have like a very clear understanding between each other that things were going wrong, and they would like spiral, both get tilted at the same time, both like very animated figures. And I think that's probably very negative for the team. But I do agree. I think Crimbo and JDC might be wasting their time on this big project, because I think JDC, he's shown a capacity to be able to do star roles. He may not be able to get those positions in top tier teams, but just being able to flex that kind of level, a lot of teams have done that before, where suddenly it's like, oh, you were a star player in your previous roster, well, now you get all the shit roles, but you're gonna be able to at least like get yours usually. And that'll be a big development piece for them. That and Crimbo is just, yeah, he is fucking good. He is really fucking good.
He is. And yeah, you're right about JDC's like upward scalability, essentially. Is like, if you're a team who needs a guy who can play the aggressive star entry role, like that's sort of the modern star entry as we think about it. I guess he's done it now. I still don't think he's that great at it. I think he's serviceable, good enough, especially for considering what rifle talent Big have currently on current form is aggressively nothing. Like, they have Crimbo, who is just poetry in motion at times in the late round. Like, he truly is outstanding. But yeah, JDC, his upward momentum is going to be, oh yeah, I can be your third, fourth player who then can have moments, have his rounds. He can do anything, and he's very open to it. We've heard this going as far back as Mouse and XT. He will play any role to win games, and he will play them pretty well, at least according to Cyclone back in the day. Like, he believed that JDC could play any role, whatever he needed him to play. And so we've seen a little bit of that evolution here. I just find Searson's form on lands they're trying to win, suspect. Pro League, the first event with Talbi, I believe, with Talbi as an analyst again. And all of a sudden, boom, ridiculous fragging numbers, actually stomps the teams he's meant to stomp, then comes into Atlanta and really doesn't. And that's a massive just momentum, just hitting the wall. Like, he just straight crashed that car. So for me, I'm off the Searson part of this that I'm supposed to be excited about. And I have to reiterate the point of, what the hell are we doing with Rigon here? Because I'm like, you bring Rigon for some edge, some like brain dead aggression, just someone who's not going to say no to a push. Essentially is how I saw him in my head. Like, he's going to be very open and free, willing to go and take those aggressive fights. And yet he's not. He's now like anchoring and kind of like sort of in the pack doing some sort of entry work sometimes. Like, he's traded a fair amount, but I'm like, I didn't need this if I was Big. I didn't need a disciplined, like, role-playing rifler.
That was Process.
Exactly, that was Process.
Yeah.
And Tabson played fairly well off of Process. Like, his form was declining, and here it's hit all-time lows, I think, for him in his career. So that's another worrying aspect. So I don't really get that whole formation of it. Now, for me to believe they are outright better than 3D Max, I have to have seen Big beat more good teams. They just haven't beaten good teams, like, for me, and enough of them. Like, you might say 3D Max, sure, they can't beat Spirit in a BO3, because I think in a BO1 they can, but they can beat a lot of teams who are like 10th to 15th in the world in BO3s consistently with almost random map pools sometimes. They can do it in so many different ways, just because they have so many different nutcases on this team who can actually go do work with a rifle, and an AWPer who is surprisingly cerebral and explosive in Maka, whilst also calling. Still impressive. One day we might get him on just an AWP role. Maybe he'll be even better, but for now, this is all we've got. So no, I'm not sold on Big. That's kind of my pitch as to why I prefer 3D Max. I just have too many question marks about the big, impactful roles and big pieces that they need to have rolling. Crimbo, outstanding. Never doubted it. Probably better than every player on 3D Max ever, like currently or historically their form gives them. He's better than all of them. But I just can't rely on the closer to win me games. 1v3s for 13 rounds isn't good enough. I need to win those openers. I need to have my AWPer trading. I need to have these things in place, and it just doesn't feel like they do.
Yeah, I have to say, by the way, that Atlanta final was depressing because it was just like Crimbo versus the world. Like,
Yeah.
all of FlyQuest firing, Crimbo like looking down the aisle. Where's my
He's
team?
unreal.
Yeah.
He was
It was
so
actually a
good
1v9.
as well.
Yeah, I didn't watch it live. I just remember looking at the scoreboard later and going, what the fuck happened?
He was 1v9. It was
What?
actually mad.
80 and 46 and y'all lost? Nah,
Yeah. That was a definition, like, you know, like, what was it, like, no help meme?
Yeah.
That was the definition, because like no one else on the team even went positive, right? Nobody even got like a +1 rating, right?
No.
So it was just like, you know, he was literally on his own. I mean, maybe that's where we kind of say like what happened to JDC, but I mean the rest of that team just fell apart.
Yeah, that's the problem. We used to you'd think, oh yeah, I'm big. I've got firepower depth in places like Tabson's my caller, but it was Tabson. He's one of the most talented players to ever not be a big superstar, like who gave up that sort of privilege to go just be with his countrymen and call and think about the game rather than just shoot heads. He can shoot heads. At this point, no longer. We just don't have that to rely on. Obviously, Searson, we know the rest of his name. It ends O-N. We need to add 4 more letters. L-I-N-E. Like that, bro, is an online-er. And whilst Pro League tried to prove otherwise, Atlanta came around and just dashed those hopes for me, so I couldn't pick them. Clearly no one else believed in them enough to sacrifice one of their actually legit picks for them, so I think that's why they have to remain at the bottom of the barrel. Just to wrap up the show, we do have 2 underdogs we didn't pick. 2 other teams we didn't pick, sorry, not 2 underdogs. But we didn't pick Parivision, and we didn't pick Virtus Pro. I think we can leave those for another show, because we are now 2 hours and 4 minutes in, and I think all the kids need to go to bed, so people who have their children listening to this show, I'm sorry. Why? You knew this was coming. It was your mistake. We can't promise less uses of the word wank next time. So maybe put them to bed before you put the show on. So
Norbert's the GOAT. That's how I'll leave it.
My King Norby. I have Norbert stickers on like 3 different
He's
guns.
my king.
My king.
do you know what winds me up? I ran some stats. I bring these up a lot now because they're so fun. Looking for explosive players in Tier 1. We did the filter first time with the most stringent filters possible, and it was like kind of ridiculous. The results we got, like, had Snappy and Apex come towards the top. We're like, okay, this is being too tight and specific. And Norbert was there, like, Norbert. Then we opened it up, and then all the top rifles appeared, and Norbert just stayed right fucking there in the top 10. We're like, no way.
My king.
That's why he's the best.
My King Norby.
Secretly goated in the deep stats. The deep lore of the Counter-Strike stats actually paint Norbert as a god. So, yeah, just a little detail I'm sure everyone appreciates. But all right, Ne0Kai, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you on, sharing a lot of interesting stories, especially. Oh, I can't believe Brain broke his ankle like that. And yeah, that's all for this one. If you liked it, like the video. Leave a comment telling us why we're wrong. We're not, but we appreciate the comments. It's interaction at the end of the day. Sub for more and become a member if you want rights and more content, all that good stuff. So yeah, we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.